Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Gawthorne, and with me as always is Liam Billingham, and today's film is Con Air!
It's Die Hard in a prison plane! It's also the greatest movie of the 1990s! Fucking hell, this movie kicks ass!
Wow! We are so excited to be doing a movie that, as you know, pretty much defines one of the reasons we want to do this show. Absolutely in the bullseye of a Die Hard on a Blank movie. And because of the stature of this movie, we had to bring in a very special guest. Would you like to introduce
our special guest is Scout Tafoya. Scout, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is a very exciting day for me. This is, there are very few moments in life where you feel like you were really put here to do something, and to talk about Con Air on the Die Hard on a Blank podcast is definitely one of those things.
Yeah, this is a hot commodity. A lot of people were like, "Can I do Con Air?" And I was like, "No, we have our guy. We have our guy." Scout is a, and speaking of our guy, Scout is a filmmaker. He's a film critic. He does an amazing series for RogerEbert.com, The Unloved, which included a personal favorite of Phil and I, Public Enemies, Michael Mann's late period masterpiece. And most excitingly, Scout is the author recently of the book, and I'm going to hold it up so people can see it. Oh no, my Con Air background is ruining this. There it is. But God, oh my goodness.
Hold it over your own face.
Hold it over my own face. Is that better? But
there
God made him a poet.
I just needed you to do that for other reasons.
Now you know what you look like when you get older.
I kid because I love.
The name of the book is But God Made Him a Poet, Watching John Ford in the 21st Century. And I've been thinking a lot about John Ford recently. I've been watching a lot of John Ford recently because, in addition to Scout's book, our friends over at Turner Classic Movies have had a season featured on John Ford. Scout was a guest. And part of what prompted this is I know that you love this movie, but also the fact that I saw John Ford's Stagecoach for the first time this year. And I had a reaction to it. This is like, John Ford made several of the greatest American movies ever made. But I wonder, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this, is Stagecoach among the first action movies that takes place in like a contained, environment where there are uneasy shifting alliances and sort of a man on a mission kind of quality?
I think you'd find other precedents. For instance, Ford made a handful of boat and submarine movies, and so there's evidence of the containment of personalities stretching back pretty much as far as cinema goes. But I think Ford had a particular interest in that as somebody who was Irish by nationality and following the struggle for Irish independence, and so understanding that they were squeezed together in a tiny space with their with the thumb of the great oppressor on the scales against them, and how much your home can become a battlefield when somebody has decided to make you their enemy. Not that has any contemporary relevance, but he definitely had a love of showing many different types of male archetype,
right?
Like, as you say, contained within a certain space. The Long Voyage Home is a great example.
I love
of this
that
kind
movie.
Of a movie. That's a terrific movie. That's truly one of his best. Ford on a good day wouldn't cop to having seen, let alone enjoying, a lot of his own films, but he did. There's a great piece of footage that just made the rounds the other day, where he cops to loving and having seen The Long Voyage Home, which is shot by the great Greg Toland.
It's like a rehearsal for Citizen Kane. People describe it
very
as
much,
almost, yeah,
very much. Yeah, it's his work for Wyler was really what sort of primed him to make Kane as good as it was. But that's I can't remember. Manny Farber or James Agee or somebody talked about how Wuthering Heights was the film that Greg Toland should have been more celebrated for making that same year, which is a Wyler film. But anyway, Stagecoach is a great. I mean, obviously it captured the imagination of audiences all over the globe. It was remade at least twice, just straight up. once in the 60s, once in the 80s, which had a bunch of country singers in it, Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash. It is a dreadful, dreadful fucking movie, but it sure exists. And then uh, it was sort of, COD remade in a hundred different ways. I mean, you could sort of see something like Ice Station Zebra as a remake of Stagecoach. It really, you're taking people from one place to another, and not everybody makes it. It's a thrilling plot, to have in any milieu, and I think he just got a ton of mileage out of it because these were characters that he'd been making movies about and had a lot of fondness for. I mean, since the very beginning. You go back to his westerns, the very first features that he made in the late teens, and you can already see these archetypes emerging there. And so, sort of sandwiching them together to get the most out of their tension, really brought out the best in Ford and his most excitable, boyish enthusiasm for genre.
Well,
Right.
Speaking of cinema at its highest art form, let's talk about this movie and your individual relationship with it, Scout. Like, when did you first see this, and has it been in your life for a long time, or how did you intersect with this masterpiece that I would put alongside all of the films that you've just cited?
I saw, because my dad loved me. We went and saw all of the big action films in theaters. I was before coming on to record with you fine gentlemen this morning, I was doing a video essay on Starship Troopers, which was another film that I saw in theaters, and doing the math there, I believe 8 years old when I saw Starship Troopers in theaters with my dad, so too young.
Be still
And
my
that one
heart.
really,
Be
Yeah,
still
yeah,
my
that one-
heart.
that one fucked me up pretty good seeing that in theaters. Or like Deep Rising was another one, which is also sort of a Stagecoach derived film. And So we saw Con Air in theaters, and I just loved every second of it. I loved the things about it that spoke to me as a young, violence obsessed, boy.
American boy.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Those things you kind of come to understand the sort of very peculiar nature of the iteration that you get in a movie like Con Air, where like the score by Trevor Rabin, I didn't know that Trevor Rabin was the guitarist for Yes. I didn't know that he had turned to film scoring like so many other new wave musicians. You think about Hans Zimmer as the king of the modern film score, as it's popularly understood. And Trevor Rabin in this, just like, first of all, just shredding on the guitar, just wailing away with his Stratocaster.
This is
Yeah.
almost the last hurrah for that type of style, because it was kind of out of fashion, but it works for this because it is kind of heavy metal filmmaking. I mean, Yes is more like prog rock and stuff, but this is it embraces its kind of cheesiness, with that like sliding guitar, and it works for the tonality of this maximalist madness that is this movie. But sorry, go. Yes, please continue.
No, I mean, I completely agree with you. It's funny, you say metal, and obviously, you're referring to the music, but also you can't help but think of Metal Hurlant and Heavy Metal Magazine, and the intersection between animation and comic books and metal music and violence in the 80s, and what a force for evil that looked to the sort of mainstream conservative cultural establishment in this country and in England too. But and how much Con Air to me today is such a composed film. It is such a specific, I in my essay on it, at this point probably 3 years ago, I compared it to anime, because that to me is the closest thing that I could come up with to describe things like the great shots of the cons hiding under destroyed cars, watching the feet of US Marshals and Marines walking by. And I was so impressed with that. This was, I think, and again, easiest thing in the world to disprove. This was Simon West's first feature. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. He was a music video
and
guy.
what a he was a music
so
video guy.
he was
Yes, that's
attuned
right.
to that, the musicality of of image making, right? Like something we talked about a lot with Die Hard, Tyrion being very musically, but very symphonic. Right?
Yeah. Yes. And the idea of pictures having to lock into each other like building blocks in order to get you through the story of a song. You only have 4 minutes to do it, and so every image does kind of have to speak to each other in such a way. And Con Air has gorgeous mise en scène. Like, it's not, there's very little in the way of fluid camera work and things like that, which is what I typically enjoy in a film of this vintage. I mean, you think about Paul Verhoeven, he would keep the camera running pretty much as he could get away with. There are a lot of great, both steady cam shots and sort of faked ones. He did a lot of subliminal cutting in his movies. Friedkin was the same way. Jade comes out in 95. That was the last of his big action movies, and it's the same thing. And this is so purposeful in its tripod. We're setting down here, something sort of rockets into frame. The death of the undercover agent is a great example of that, which is scored to the great Trevor Rabin score. Like every piece of it, it just fits together so magnificently. It really is a movie that is all about momentum. And despite the fact that the camera doesn't really move, you still get this great sense of propulsion. So all this to say, I saw it practically opening day and was head over heels in love with it. And I have returned to it time and time and time again since then. Huge fan. And, I do a series called Dad Rock about 90s action movies. And this is up there for me. Like, the only other film I would like immediately sort of put in front of it as far as the stuff that I've covered is John Woo's Hard Boiled. That's kind of the only thing that trumps it for me. Like,
we should talk.
You guys should be best friends because for a couple reasons. Number one, the fact that we're 10 minutes in and there have been 2 Paul Verhoeven references is a
Tick
very
off
good
bingo
sign.
card, boys.
Because that's our boy. And then Phil and me, but Phil Hard Boiled is church for Phil. That's the best way that I can describe it.
Yeah,
we had it on VHS at my house. We had it in the weird Australian dub that was not uncommon for a lot of Hong Kong action movies at the time.
I think I saw that too at first. I think I saw that version of it too.
We need to talk about Dad Rock. I've got to ask you more about this because
please, of course,
right up my alley. Liam, what's your relationship with this movie? Though? Did you see this when it?
I saw
upon
this
release.
movie
I'm assuming
at 8 p.m. on June 6th, 1997. The day it came out with my dad. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I was colossally disappointed by it.
What?
I did not like it. I have feelings about why.
Plot thickens.
I know. I have feelings about why. I think some of it was like I was still like on the vapor of The Rock from the year before and was like, Nick Cage is the greatest to ever do it. This is going to be amazing. This movie has a killer trailer. Cyrus the Virus Grissom. It's like a beginning of a wrestling match. And I think I was actually, as a somewhat sensitive 15-year-old boy, a little disturbed by it. I think there were things about, like, I wasn't quite able to, like, parse that it was, like, kind of arch and broad at times, but I didn't come back to it for 20 years, maybe. And I recently I've watched it 3 times this year. And I think it is like
I watch it all the time.
I think it's kind of like a I think on some, we have this running
keeps on giving.
joke is that we say Corey Atad on Twitter was like, it's a 5-star 3-star movie, and I disagree. I think this movie is a 5-star 5-star movie, and I
agree.
think it is like a deeply complex movie about America in the 90s. And I think that there's just so much to this movie, and it's kind of like, I'm going to say something that controversial here. It's kind of like jumped over Snake Eyes for me in this 4-movie run that Nick Cage has of The Rock, Face Off, Con Air, and Snake Eyes. And I'm like so in for this movie. So
I love Snake Eyes, but this is a better film than Snake Eyes because Snake Eyes kind of fumbles the ending.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is perfect. This is structurally a perfect movie.
I think, too, that the De Palma is a little at war with himself in Snake Eyes, where part of him wants to make, the pure trash stuff that he was so good at. And I think part of him also has this moment where he's going to do Raging Bull. And I think the individual components work. Because, like, that the boxing set to the Ryuichi Sakamoto score is perfect and beautiful. It just doesn't quite interlock with the raving gambler, plot that it interrupts. So I think that each little bit of it works very well. I just don't think it coheres in a way that this does, which is itself all the way through.
Yes.
This movie
it knows
starts
exactly
with,
what it is.
Yeah.
It knows exactly the tone. And it's interesting what you're saying, Liam, because I think, as a sensitive, young moviegoer, if you were to take this film on face value and not quite attuned to the fact that this is intentionally kind of demented and bonkers, and you realize that it's kind of a joke. If you take it on face value, it would be very disturbing. But I think because you say, as you're just saying, Scout, like it is so consistent with what it's aiming to be and commits to it from the very beginning. Very exaggerated, bold, over the top in the best possible way. Over the top, as an expression, doesn't have to be pejorative. Face Off's over the top. But it's part of it. It's the operatic, nature of it. That was hitting its kind of apex at this time. Real quick, and then I'll want to move on to the fast facts. And we've got plenty more space to unpack this when we get to our
Can't wait to talk about the Clinton crime bill.
Just to and your
absolutely
the French philosophy that you've been reading and to relate to this as
Foucault.
well.
We'll see if we get there.
But I saw this when it came out as well. Loved it. I've loved it on day one. Loved it ever since. I won't waste too much time talking about that because there's nothing particularly complex with it. This is just a film that I've loved my entire life from the moment I saw it and revisited it many, many times, and absolutely loved the revisit. Like loved it. And I've been saving it as well. It was like the last present that you want to open. You don't want to open it too soon. Let's move on to our fast facts, just to put some of this in context. So Con Air was released in the US by Buena Vista Pictures on June 6, 1997. I guess that's probably the actual premiere. I think the actual date was June 10th.
The day before my birthday that year. So that would have been what we did.
Oh, then I saw it June
Amazing.
10th. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So I saw it June 10th, but I saw it opening night.
So that's approximately 1 month after our last film, Breakdown, which was May 2nd, almost 9 years now after Die Hard. It was produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, the first film he produced solo without longtime producing partner Don Simpson, hence the new sting at the start of the film for his new production shingle, which feels like it was trying to honor Don Simpson in a way, with instead of the two lightning bolts converging, it's a lightning bolt hitting the oak tree. Directed by Simon West, written by Scott Rosenberg, a very, very interesting writer that I would like to talk about a little bit later. And it stars, I'll be here all day, so I'm just going to say some of the top line folks: Nicolas Cage, John Cusack, John Malkovich, Ving Rhames, Steve Buscemi, many, many more who we'll get to, and an estimated budget of $75 million. It grossed $224 million. Really, really, a big hit.
How much was the budget again?
75.
Wow.
75
Wow,
million
every dollar of that is on
American.
the screen.
It is, yeah.
That is, this
Quite
movie
low,
would cost
actually.
$150 million now,
absolutely.
at minimum. It'd be huge.
Absolutely.
The catering
all
would be
in camera
$75
stuff, gigantic stunts. The Vegas stuff, which was actually
unbelievable.
in Vegas.
Jesus Christ, this movie rules.
This movie's amazing. Turn this off and go and watch it right now.
Yeah, I was going to say. I remember what a huge deal the destruction of the casino set was at the time. That was, there used to be so much like puff journalism on, Bravo and AMC and, back when television was obsessed with movies because they knew they could never top it. So they were just trying to constantly huff the fumes of excitement from movies. And so there were all these shows about expensive set pieces and the biggest explosions in movies and stuff like that. And Con Air was, oh my God, it was like the content it generated in 97 TV was never ending. It was just a constant font.
If this movie must set some kind of record for the amount of explosions, because it feels like it's one continuous explosion for 2 hours, and I'm here for every one of them.
Oh my God, it rocks! Okay.
Well, some of the other movies that we've talked about on the show, recently we've done The Relic and Breakdown, which people might think, okay, that's a bit of a stretch.
I love
Great movies. but movies that we kind of had to justify as to their die-hard links. And I think we made the case for them. Whether you agree or not is up to the listener.
We don't care, to be honest. It's your problem.
Whatever. We're doing them anyway.
Yeah. Our show.
But this is a classic. So let's break down the connections between this film and the original classic Die Hard in the section that we like to call
Die Hard DNA. Can't do a podcast without a Jurassic Park reference. It's important.
So let's go through this. I'm going to list the ones that I found, and then feel free to please, chime in or add any that you find. Of course, it's a classic Die Hard on a blank premise. Bad guys take over a blank, in this case, prison plane. It's up to one guy or small group of folks to fight back. It ticks all of those boxes, right? Off the top. The emotional core of the story, though, again, is a husband trying to reunite with his wife and being continually thwarted by a fiendish, hyper-intelligent, and frequently hilarious villain and his minions. And then
Sayonara.
Oh boy, well, so much to cover. So much to cover.
Sayonara. That's so good.
The line that caught me by surprise is when Cusack says to Cage, "You're not such a bad guy. You're just always in the wrong place at the wrong time." I mean, that feels like that could have been in any Die Hard sequel.
Yeah.
That's 100% that's like a Die Hard 2 line. You've got a hero sporting a white tank top for much of the film, right? Especially in the second half. Yes. The hero bringing a cuddly stuffed animal on a plane as a gift for their kid.
Yeah.
Right? As John McClane does at the beginning of Die Hard with the cuddly bear that ends up in Argyle's limo. Something I'm a big fan of, and this has come up a few times on the show, corpse play. Our hero writing a message on a dead guy's chest.
Dumping a body out the window,
Exactly, yeah. In Die Hard, of course, he writes, "Now I have a machine gun, ho, ho, ho." Here, he writes a message to Marshal Larkin landing on the Lerner airfield.
I'm going to do a lot of Nicolas Cage. School is hard.
I'm coming home, hummingbird. Coming home forever.
Come home, son!
With supposed good guys responding to the crisis, the supposed good guys responding to the crisis includes an ignorant, macho, and hyper-aggressive federal agent. You've also got the cops launching a series of stupid gung-ho plans, including a reckless helicopter assault on the besieged entity. And then you've got this sentimental, pseudo-magical ending where the husband and wife are reunited while paper... in this case, money from the armored car, I think, right?
Jeez, man.
Falling from the sky like snow, like confetti. If you remember the end of Die Hard at the Nakatomi Plaza, the paper is falling out, right? Yep. Bearer bonds and the paper, office paper and stuff, all cascading from the sky to add to that festival feel. This film has that too. And it also has the hero's new cop buddy looking on admiringly as the husband and wife unite. Al Powell, Marshal Larkin. So it is filthy with Die Hard DNA.
It really is. Wow.
Any other stuff that you guys spotted in terms of connections or additions to this?
I would say that they both play fast and loose with what were then contemporary political issues as a smokescreen for garden variety greed and violence, which is to say that in the form of Ving Rhames, Nathan Diamond Dog, they introduce him essentially as if he's a sort of the version of the Black Panthers that conservative media always pretended existed but never did. And so, he's talking about, why are you taking orders from a white guy? And he says, well, I'm using him to get what I need, and then the day of the dog can start. And I think that's the idea is that it seems like it's political, but it isn't, in the same way that Hans Gruber is, the members of Asian Dawn. These comrades must be released.
I love an impression. More than that, another thing that this movie does to that point is that it my favorite line in Die Hard is Bruce Willis saying, "and enough explosives to orbit Arnold Schwarzenegger," because I think that is such a genius choice to make this guy an everyman and to connect him to the larger culture. And one of the things, we'll get to this probably dick of the movie, but the prison guard who just sucks, like the suckiest guy in the world, is like, I see some Geraldos in here. I see some book of like
hard copies.
Yeah, some hard copies. Like, I like that. I really like and think it's intelligent when these movies are kind of acknowledge that like the sort of media saturation of like, like the true crime craze before we called it the true crime craze, and just being
they say
aware of the
they're
media.
talking to Denzel for the movie about
exactly.
Diamond
That's
Dog,
right.
right?
So Denzel for the movie,
it does have this metatextual
well, that's my favorite scene in the movie. In some ways, is the scene where Malkovich.
I could watch that for 3 hours, like just
So
leading out really
good.
amazing character actors playing these like vividly designed convicts, like just
the degree of civility. The fact that this is an action movie from 1997 and John Cusack quotes Dostoevsky saying the degree of civility in a society can be judged by observing its prisoners. 15-year-old me had no idea. Like, no idea.
That was on the trailer as well. That had that quote on the trailer.
Smart. It's like a brilliant movie. It's so brilliant. I'm gonna go watch. Bye, guys.
Let's dig into this in a little bit more detail after this quick break. And we're back with our next section of the show, Anatomy of.
We had
to go and
we took a break. We all watched Con Air.
We had to all go watch it again.
We're gonna watch it again. We're doing weights here. We're getting very sweaty. We're getting our tattoos.
Is this the hottest Nick Cage ever was? When he gets in the tank top, it's like, holy shit.
He was ripped. Yeah, I mean, he was.
I don't know. I like him. I don't know. I like him with the shorter hair. I like him like. The long hair doesn't do anything for me in the context of a Nick Cage. Like, I feel like
it's an interesting choice.
It's a choice. I don't know. I think he had to do it because he had just made The Rock and Snake Eyes was on the horizon and Face Off too.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so you really have to, it's very funny that this guy who is a Marine, he's doing like the samurai thing where he needs to let the hair do what it's going to do to show that he has fallen out of the warrior code, that he's no longer the that great bit where
he's clean cut at the beginning, isn't he, when he's still in uniform. But there is something to be said for a mullet, as we discussed on our Hard Target episode with Kyle Brandt, because if you use a lot of slow-mo in action, the flowing hair actually adds to the aesthetic. But we'll pause on that for a second, and we'll get into Cameron Poe in a moment when we come to the hero section. But we're going to talk about anatomy of an action movie and the various tenets we live in a Twilight world that comprise an action movie. Do we have time to do it?
Scout, where are you on Tenet?
I suppose we have to, don't we?
I don't really like Tenet. I don't know.
Let's move on.
Good podcast until now. No, that's fine. That's fine. Nobody. That's the joy of the Tenet experience.
It divides
People are like,
everybody.
I hate it, and I'm like, I understand. I get it.
It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
The first tenet of Anatomy of an Action Movie is the premise, and the premise of Con Air is as follows. So, after serving a long and harsh sentence for a self-defense killing, parolee and ex-Army Ranger Cameron Poe, Nicolas Cage, travels on a prisoner transport plane nicknamed Con Air to meet with his wife and daughter. But when said plane is taken over by vicious criminal mastermind Cyrus The Virus Grissom, John Malkovich, and his bloodthirsty cohorts, Poe finds himself unable to abandon his friend Baby-O, Mykelti Williamson, and vulnerable female prison guard Sally Bishop, Rachel Ticotin, and decides to fight back against the vicious convicts with the help of unconventional US Marshal Vince Larkin, John Cusack, who assists his efforts from the ground. Very Al Powell, not so much like the vibes of their friendship.
They don't really like each other.
Yeah, well, he doesn't. I think Larkin likes Poe, but Poe just doesn't trust anyone, right? And he even says that, and he's especially mistrustful of authority and cops.
There's only two men I trust.
Exactly. Exactly.
What is it? This performance
Such
is
incredible
so weird.
stuff.
It's pretty good.
But
I think I like too that Cusack's performance is of this. He's a guy who's in his element because he never actually gets face time with criminals. He's, a game theory guy. He's a behind the scenes dude. And then in the field, face to face with Cameron Poe, he's like terrified. Totally. And that's a great performance.
That's a good point.
Note
yeah.
Him.
He's like, that is a really good point. When that standoff, he's like sort of kind of, you feel like he's kind of out of his depth, where for Cameron Poe, it's like, this is business. This is just another day at the office.
Exactly. You're right. Yeah.
The ticking clock of this movie, I'll just want to sort of touch on that and then open it up to you guys about your general thoughts, free form about what this movie is saying, what it's saying, its thematics, all of that. But the ticking clock, which is important just to cover, is can Poe quite innovative? Can Poe take back control of the plane and stop the criminals before his diabetic friend Baby-O dies from a lack of insulin, and before the convicted serial rapist Johnny 23, played by Danny Trejo, has his way with the captured prison guard Sally Bishop, and also before the criminals discover his true agenda and identity. So it's interesting. The only reason I sort of just wanted to cover that was we think of this film as like, this is a simplistic film. But convicts on a plane, a guy fights back. It's actually the mechanics of it are incredibly complex, even though it doesn't feel in any way like you can completely turn your brain off and just let this film wash over you and overpower you. But at the same time, it's actually brilliantly plotted and designed. And, so this is one of our, I was saying to Liam before, this is like Groundhog Day. It's Die Hard on a plane. Again, but this is it's interesting to look at how these films do it in different ways. We've done like Passenger 57, which this has structural similarity to, because like Passenger 57, the plane lands in the middle of the movie for a different set piece, and in Passenger 57 it's like at the fairground. Here it's the Carson City stuff, versus a film like Executive Decision and, as I recall, Air Force One, where they stay on the plane. Once they're on the plane, they stay on the plane for the entire movie, right?
So it's interesting to look at how
great
movie.
How these movies attack the premise. Even though they're all Die Hard on a Plane movies, they can attack the premise in sort of different ways. I want to kick it over to you guys now, and like your thoughts on this premise, the execution of it. What's this film about as well? What's it trying to say? Like, I'm just gonna.
This might get a little all over the place, because I've been thinking about this movie basically several times a week for months, because I watched it like 6 months ago. I think it's about a lot of different things. I think one thing that first of all, I should say that I think that this movie is executed on an incredibly high level. It's really like a masterwork of action cinema, and I also think there's something subversive going on with the definition of what a criminal is and what insanity is. I think there's like layers to this that I think we can get into when we talk about Nick Cage. But I think my big takeaway from this movie is that on one level, it's sort of about a sane man in an insane world whose sanity is challenged by one particular character. I think we all know, Buscemi's part. And I just think it works on multi-layers, and there are really provocative images in this movie that, like, I'll give you an example of one is Ving Rhames whipping the white prisoners while they try to drag the guards,
the oppressors.
Yeah, he's whipping them as he digs them out of the mud. The moment when there's a line where someone says, like, call the affirmative action office. I think it's Malkovich, right? Says it to Poe. The degree of civility in a society can be judged by its prisoners. The fact that Larkin is like this kind of lefty who works in mass incarceration. I don't know that if I can say what I think it all sums up to, but I think it's a kind of deeply complicated movie about the 90s.
I think that, absolutely yes to everything you're saying. I think what it was hinting at, and the fact that the movie at times feels so deliberately apocalyptic in its imagery, is that what we were leaving behind was this very antiquated idea of incarceration and law enforcement as something intuitive as far as the, integration of a society. That, like, there's an anecdote that my dad picked up from something. They were interviewing cops. It was in a true crime thing about, some ancient serial killer situation. And they interviewed cops about why they took the job, and a lot of them said they did it because they wanted to work outside. And in the 50s and 60s, it was that you could, join a construction crew, go work on a derrick. There were, like, you took the jobs that were available to you, and because you didn't need to have passed, you didn't need to have graduated college or gotten high SAT scores to become a cop, anybody could do it. And so there really wasn't any sense that the people who were doing the jobs were in any way qualified for them or temperamentally fit to do it. And so, as with the construction of roads or any other civil service, there was an understanding that it was just going because that's how society worked. And then, as Jim Crow ends, and the era of white flight and the terror of white policemen all across America at having to deal with an eventuality they never thought would come to pass, because they believed that they had their thumb on the crack in society that would allow for the prosperity of people who didn't look like them. And suddenly, you've got the Watts riots and everything, where people are demanding their long suppressed dignity and humanity and the same rights to property and to demonstration as anybody else. You have in very near my hometown the Move bombing, where they destroy a neighborhood in Philadelphia because of black men demonstrating with guns. And obviously this comes after years of locking up Black Panthers whose only crime was standing around and making speeches, some of them armed. And this was an intolerable situation for, the J. Edgar Hoovers of the world, who then find their fullest form in Con Air in the form of Cole Meany's marshal, who comes in to try to get information out of the Colombian drug dealer, and what is it, Sandino, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie shows that, in the beginning, it's this well-oiled machine where it's okay, we got this guy, we got this guy, we got this, we've done this 1,000 times, it's a walk in the park, nothing to worry about. And the one attendant, or person who works under Cusack even says all those animals on one plane, and he really kind of chews her out for it. He goes please, this is a well-oiled machine. It's
right.
They thought through everything, except of course they didn't, because you cannot continue to, that if you think you have incarceration down to a science, somebody will break it. Some mad scientist will come along and push the boundaries of that, and then suddenly you have new problems. And this leads to exactly where we are right now, where we have underestimated what will happen when the overcrowded prison system sort of becomes its own animal. And we're using prison labor to create to manufacture, what is it, something like 40% of goods in America or something like that are touched by the hands of prisoners. I forget what the statistic is. But it's, there's an enormous amount of, and Kamala Harris, that was one of her major platforms when she was an attorney and in California. Prison labor is still what this country runs on. And I think that Con Air is sort of a window into the idea that, eventually you're going to find people who simply are not cut out for prison labor, who have thought too long and too hard about it and will do something about it. Obviously this turns them into Bond villains. But again, there's something about Hollywood creating this, this series of boogeymen for, every sector of the audience, where you've got the guy who cut off his wife's head and drove a mile across town to kill her parents. You've got the guy who is a mastermind, who has thought 10 steps ahead of whatever law enforcement guy is on his trail. And you've got the Black Panther, who just exists in this movie to kill white people. And it's, every fear that white middle-class America has is somewhere in that movie and somewhere on that plane.
And yet, something it does is it makes the characters you like on some level. You like Diamond Dog. I love Diamond Dog. I love Cyrus the Virus. And and I think that's the subversion in this movie. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but you think about Ebert had a great line about the end credits, and he says at the end of the movie you see them all smiling at the camera, even Johnny 23, and it's smiling as if they've all had the time of their lives, and they have, and it's and so have we. That's the point, is that getting to know these fucking psychopaths is half the fun of a movie like this. I mean, it's why really, the crime of Die Hard ultimately is that you don't know the guys any better. They're all sort of very beautiful European sweater models.
By the way, just on this point, because I'm glad you brought this up, because I was going to say, were I to become president, I'd have two policies. One would be a permanent ban on leaf blowers unless they were silent. The other is that every movie has to end the way that Con Air ends, with all the cast smiling with their credit come up. The first movie I remember doing that was Top Gun.
Shotgun.
Yeah, Predator does it too. The recent Scream movies do a version of it, and the sort of the fifth one that was like this sort of retcon remake one, requel, did it, and it was part of there's something about doing that leaves you feeling you leave the theater feeling fantastic. It's really an amazing thing.
This is like a fun summer movie with some dark resonance. What you're saying
is so interesting because it is almost like let's take a collection of our fears. The Hannibal Lecter-esque, multiple murder play.
The late great Hannibal Lecter.
This movie is referencing.
He's doing a lot of good work.
We love what he did to the pigs in Hannibal. Not everyone loves Hannibal. I like Hannibal.
I like Hannibal. I liked him in Italy. Italy's great. They've got good wine, not good wine.
The ham that you eat in Italy, it's delicious.
It's good ham. It's Siberian.
Ham. The best is Siberian. They brought it from Spain. Spain's okay, not Italy.
It is. These characters symbolize a bunch of different fears. The sort of bourgeois fears, I suppose, if you like, of these, terrifying, figures, but they're exaggerated and they're somewhat stereotyped is the wrong word because they're actually quite like they're archetypes. They're archetypes, but yes, within that archetype, they are nuanced and complex and interesting, and they're all played by incredibly strong actors.
What a cast!
I couldn't believe it. It just keeps going every time. Like a new actor turns up, and then halfway through, Buscemi shows up.
Who's the actor who is in the car with his wife? That guy is like that
guy. Don something or other. He was Major Briggs on Twin Peaks.
Right. Yes, exactly. Like it's like, this guy has 3 lines in this movie, and I've seen him in a million things.
Well, I love this era of studio filmmaking for that reason alone, is that there was so much money going around, and these guys were just so clearly having so much fun that they would bring you around for a couple of lines or whatever, and these directors, Verhoeven, of course, is very much...
Three Verhoeven references, 3. It's
3 Verhoeven references.
So good.
Where just the idea that, he got along so well with Michael Ironside that he fit him in wherever he could, and he was always appropriate. And that's how do you not love that? Where,
Ironside could be in this movie as any character, he could play almost any character.
A much more chilling version of the Colmini character. You could see him doing that.
He could be that. He could be the Marietta Mangler. He could be Bill Bedlam.
I was going to say, in the 80s, I think in Scanner's days, he would have been a perfect Billy Bedlam.
Man. Yeah.
Daryl Revok!
I think to one really specific thing that Scout brought up is that 3 years before this movie comes out is what's called the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, which is a 356. It's the largest crime bill in American history. 100,000 new police officers, $9.7 billion in funding for prisons, which were designed with significant input from the police. So there is this both the infrastructure of the country and also the mentality of a lot of politicians is let's be tough on crime. And I think this movie plays with the logical end of that idea, as Scout pointed out, but also I think, and Phil, you can tell me if we should save this for the hero section, the character who most I feel like is the most unsure of himself in this movie is the normal guy, is the action
Larkin
hero at this.
Poe?
Cameron Poe.
Okay.
I really feel like there's a moment of subversion in this movie that on a superficial level you're kind of like, okay, yeah, but I think about it constantly, which is the moment when Steve Buscemi is talking to Cage and he's just killed Billy Bedlam, if I remember correctly.
Right.
And he's like, I'm not like you. I'm not insane. And Buscemi's like, define insane. Is this insane working the same job for 50 years and then at the end of it they give you a gold watch and then you piss off and die? That might be the definition of insanity for somebody. And that to me is the line that unlocks this entire movie, because I feel like there's a lot of time spent on is Cage a convict? Is he a ranger? It's significant that this movie opens with this footage of rangers, which seems to be calling
narrated
back
by fucking Powers Booth, by the way.
The military
Coolest
recruitment
cameo.
ad at the beginning of the
Yeah,
film.
and
that
so-
is very
good.
convincing. I'm like ready to
Yeah.
sign up after watching it. Like, let's go!
No, I mean, if
Yes!
Powers Booth told me to fucking join up, I'd go wherever.
Yeah.
And it's
I
like,
go,
leave
man.
no man behind. This, and so
Yeah.
it's like Cage's character is like, is he a regular? Is he a convict? Is he a ranger? Is he a regular guy? Who is this guy? He doesn't know his daughter. He didn't want his daughter to visit him in prison. Like, there's a
Yeah,
lot
it's actually
of
kind of
layers
quite
to what's going
complex.
on with this. Yeah.
Just stick a pin in it for a second, then, because there's the
Yes.
one last point that I was going to make, and then we'll move into that in more detail. There was an expression that occurred to me to the other point that you were just making about the crime bill and this massive, like the industry that was seemingly emerging, and that has emerged over the last sort of 20, 30 years about the prison industry, essentially incarceration becoming a business. This film, the phrase that hit me was like prison porn. It actually toes the line, and I think it's not lost on me that this director is British, right? Because we see everything in American culture through a slightly different lens, right? Although the aesthetic of this film is classic Simpson Bruckheimer, and in some ways I feel like this film is like the best Michael Bay film that Michael Bay didn't make. It feels like this could absolutely be a Michael Bay film, and that's no slight to Simon West because he's great. He's great. This film is incredibly well
wonder if
directed.
Bay's style would have completely overwhelmed this movie.
But the tone of it is like right.
Yeah, you're right.
This is right there. The absurdity of it, everything being kind of exaggerated, and the bombast of it. But there is it's the aesthetics of it. I think of the shot where there's a guy like it's 1 second. It's like slow motion, and over his back is carrying
The
like
handcuffs.
100 handcuffs, right?
It's
And
so
it
good.
toes the line between like fetishism and critique.
Yes.
In one shot.
Brilliantly.
Brilliantly.
Well, just
you know what I mean?
the idea that they've given the plane its own decal is this idea that they have truly figured
like a World War II bomber or something,
yes,
right?
Exactly right. Where it's this thing that we should be excited by, where they are all clearly excited by this dystopian, design of these things. And it's, these guys all get their fucking rocks off on the idea that they have finally and truly subjugated a people that they have viewed as a lower class of human being. That's the sort of really, really tough thing to swallow about this movie, and it goes hand in hand with the fact that Poe, our hero, keeps fucking killing people. And there's just this
he won't get off the plane.
Yeah, he won't get off the plane.
Sorry, I just had to he's institutionalized.
Well, let's move into our section on the hero then, and let's get into this in more detail. Because just to your point as well, the other thing I was going to pick up on this is really interesting as we're peeling the onion of his character. In the opening scene, his wife, played by Monica Potter, says to him, like, "For a minute, you were that guy again."
Yes.
Implying he has some kind of like severe violent
but for the grace of
tendency.
God, he was Billy Bedlam once upon a time.
Seemingly so, that he had maybe an anger management or a propensity towards violence, or would get in fights or whatever it was. And maybe the military straightened him out, or and whatever, right? We don't know all of that backstory. It's only hinted at through that one line. But I mean,
well, can I make an observation?
Yeah, go ahead.
About that character right off the gate?
Go for it.
Is that at the very beginning of the movie, he comes. The opening and closing of this movie feel like a Hallmark card, and embedded between that is hell. And that's one thing that I think is so interesting about this movie. But something he does that's so
true,
smart, that choice they make, is that when those three guys approach him during the rainstorm to have the fist fight,
Wayne Grow among them,
he could just get in the car. And what does he do? He walks into like the viper's nest and they all surround him. Like, I think on some level, Cameron Poe is making a choice to have this fight. And the movie, it's introduced in this way where it's like he had no choice, but it's like there's like a solid 10 seconds where it's like, "Good night, guys," and he gets in the car and like maybe they smash the tailpipe as he's driving away, but he's gone. And so to me, it's always been interesting that I read this as like this guy is kind of an adrenaline junkie who's like he's masquerading as a good guy. I'm not saying he's not a good guy or whatever. It's but I do think that like this guy wants the fight, This guy wants to win, and he's not. To me, I think this is a really good performance, but the accent and the kind of like the way Cage plays him is that to me, there's a bit of an empty vessel there. Like there's something that hasn't quite gelled, and I think
it
some of that
reminds
is
me
the
of Hannah in Heat in the sense of like this is someone that lives for war.
Yeah.
Right? And without that,
much.
he's an empty shell. With Hannah, it's the hunt, it's the thrill of the chase, and without that, he's kind of got nothing. So, his marriage is a mess, and all the rest of it. He's complacent and disinterested and emotionally unavailable husband. Similarly, I think with it, and it's interesting that you say he doesn't actually want to see his wife and child while he's incarcerated because he's almost like needs to be in a constant state of like some kind of conflict to that's just who he is.
Well,
so
it's also
interesting reading.
Can anybody picture this guy settling down really after all of the shit that happens in the movie and all of the flowery language in the letters and everything? It's just like I just don't see it happening so much. And that feels like a pretty, and again, coming from a country whose military might is really only exists to back up the US in our bullshit wars. It's very interesting that Simon West is like, I don't know, maybe this guy just doesn't have it in him to be normal anymore. Like he was a fucking roughneck and then he became a Marine and then he became a prisoner. So what's his identity going to be when he's got none of those things, when he doesn't have any of the badges? I'm going
to go out on a limb right now and say if anyone wants to pay me to write Con Air 2, let's go. Because I really think they're doing a face-off too. I
saw that. Yeah.
Can I be a creative consultant on this?
People are going back to the well with these things, and I'd never actually thought about it because this does feel like such a perfect closed loop. But if you actually look at what you're saying, it is hard to believe that in 5, 10 years, however many years time, that he's just like chilling with. No way. He's fucking war machine.
Can I also? There's also something, and maybe this is a segue into. Well, we'll see, but. There's another really significant moment to me that questions all of this. It questions his worldview. He has a part where he's helping the prisoners. Oh, he's like, I'll go get whatever. And John Malkovich is like, thanks, Poe. And Cage says, many hands make light work. My daddy taught me that. And Malkovich goes, what my daddy taught me? Nothing. And it's just like, it's this constant, if this guy is trying to rehabilitate or whatever you want to call it, he's surrounded by maniacs.
Well, the other thing that's really interesting is the moment with the DEA agent, the other DEA agent played by Jose Zuniga, Willie Sims, where Cage kind of gets him killed. Cameron Poe kind of I look at that moment, I'm like, this is really interesting and counter to what the typical action hero would do. He's basically kind of says he kind of greases the wheels for him to die.
He does.
I mean, that moment, can we break that down? What's your reading of that, Scout?
I agree with you. I mean, there are ways to think of diffusing it, but I think also the idea that he has in his head that I'm going to stand up and become a difference in this scene that I am witnessing unfolding, whereas a more level-headed person would simply say, I'm not going to stand up when 2 guns are being pointed and hostages have been taken. Whatever my feelings about those people, a surefire way to make sure that this goes the way that it's going to go is to not say anything. They'll deal with it, and I won't have made a spectacle of myself. But he can't help but insert himself into it. It's this part of it is obviously it's you're a screenwriter, you got to give your guy something to do. But in so doing, you make him look a lot, less of a straight arrow than he did before he stood up.
Very much so. He kind of engineers his death in maybe in an unconscious way, because he's like, fuck, this is actually going to be, if you're playing chess in that situation, a DEA agent, that kind of macho aggressive guy, is just not going to be able to accept being what the situation actually requires, which is to sit down, shut up, put your gun down, and play this out. And he knows on some level, this is going to be a disruptor in the situation that is going to make it untenable, so I better eliminate him from the equation. Exactly. I'm not saying that's conscious, but I think there's some element of this is going to be bad if this is allowed to play out. It's actually better for everybody else if this guy is taken off the board, which is really fucking dark if you think about it.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you guys this? I don't know if we've ever done this on the show before, but how much do you think this is self-aware? and how much of this is just like the perfect amalgamation of time and us watching this movie later with different contexts. Because like, by no means am I suggesting that like Scott Rosenberg and Simon West and the team are not smart enough to know what they're doing, because I think they are. But like, I wouldn't have told you in 1997, granted I was 15, that Con Air had layers. I think I just would have been like, this rocks. This is like a cool movie. So I sort of wonder like how much of this
bit on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, first of all, what I wanted to say, just because you brought Scott Rosenberg is a brilliant writer. He'd written a movie that makes a lot of sense for this and why they picked him for it before this which was Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, which on a which he wrote in process with it. It was very personal. He was processing the grief of the passing of his own father. It's very much about death.
Good movie.
It's great. It's a great movie, and superficially, it's about a bunch of colorful criminals with the coolest names ever. Like Steve Buscemi is in that as a silent hitman called Mr. Shush. Christopher Walken plays a crime boss called the Man with the Plan, and the main character Randy Garcia is Jimmy the Saint. Treat Williams is a character called Critical Bill because he was a boxer that put people in critical condition. It's like it's the Things to Do in Denver walked so that Con Air could fly, right. So, but he also wrote this incredibly sensitive and also I think somewhat personal movie, Beautiful Girls, that's about
That's right.
coming to terms with how your life maybe not be the dreams that you wanted, and escaping the pull of your hometown, and that tension between wanting to be accepted by your friends and the need to go back and the need to transcend those circumstances and escape. And it's a beautiful, sad, real movie. So I think he's an incredible writer. He also did
you know where he's
Less
from?
Good, Gone in 60 Seconds, but it's also about a bunch of
love that
colorful movie. I love that movie
So
too.
entertaining. I watched it this last month.
It's not as good as this, but it's still a movie I love.
Agreed.
But I don't. This guy's not a dummy. Go on. What were you going to say?
He's from
Liam?
Massachusetts.
Oh boy. Fucking Massachusetts.
But I also want to.
Right, he's from Needham. He's from Needham.
And maybe this isn't all the best people are from Massachusetts. I love them. Maybe I want to point out that 3 years after this, he writes High Fidelity, which might be a good transition into talking about John Cusack, because I think that this movie... So you know how people are really dumb now and obsessed with fandom, and they see like a character in a superhero movie and they go like, "It me for real"? I watch this movie and I see John Cusack and I'm like, "It me for real." Because he's an intellectual jackass. He's an intellectual like lefty working in this system, and like he's a wise ass. But also, he's a big coward. And I feel both of those things are very resonant. He's the smartest guy in the room. I love that he, in this movie in 1997, that he and Cole Meany have this back and forth where Cole Meany is basically like, "Oh, so you're saying it's where the system creates criminals as opposed to society?" It's like, this is just an aside 15 minutes into a movie that just rocks. And I am like, I think that this is the... If you follow John Cusack on Twitter now, this is who he has become. This like smart, progressive dude who's just like, "Hey, I'm John Cusack. Shut the fuck up. You're wrong." And it's a really smart that he goes from Lloyd Dobler, sensitive guy in 1989, to like wise ass dude 8-9 years later.
He's kind of the smartest guy in the room as well.
And
like I love him. I love him too. And I
he's
think
good
it's
at playing those guys. Yeah,
it's cost him a lot by being as outspoken as he is. And I think he just feels I can't just play the game when there's like evil is running rampant in different ways. And he's always been like outspoken about his beliefs, whether you agree with him or not.
So much.
This character is so interesting because I think in some way it's like, and I hate this term, and we talked about it, I think, with Breakdown, that it's because I think it's so reductive. The idea of beta and alpha males, right? Duncan Malloy, the Cole Meany character, is your classic blowhard alpha male, and he is like, is he the first beta male action hero? But I would say, like, he's, in my opinion and the movie's opinion, he's like a way superior version of masculinity than someone like the Cole Meany character, who is just a knucklehead, arrogant, obnoxious idiot. This guy is empathetic. I love the scene, like when he's emotionally connected to people, like when he goes to the speaks to Cameron Poe's wife. He's so like empathetic and compassionate about the situation, and he's compassionate to Poe as well. Like he's saying this guy isn't, he sees him as more than the sum of his parts, more than the sum. This was his sentencing. If you look at the context of it, there were mitigating circumstances. I think, he's like always in the wrong place at the wrong time. I actually think he's an ally, yada yada. So but it follows in the footsteps of Stanley Goodspeed a little bit in The Rock, right?
Very much.
Which is interesting because the characters flip. Right, Cage is now is a sort of more of an alpha type in this movie, but a good somewhat a better version of an alpha. And again, I hate those terms because I don't like the idea that being intelligent and empathetic is somehow lesser. That's actually what we should aspire to, I think. But anyway,
it was part of the. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. It was part of the sort of blockbuster machinery. Roland Emmerich, who I love dearly, he made, he put this whole blockbuster machinery on his back with the idea that this split that you're talking about is the duality of the action hero, where it's in Moon 44, it's James Remar and I'm gonna space on his name, but
Michael Paré.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Michael Paré and the nerd guy who's helping him out. Literally, they're pilots and they've got their navigators. In Stargate, it's Kurt Russell and it's James Spader.
Yeah.
In Independence Day, it's Will Smith and it's Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah,
and
you're right.
this continues throughout his entire body of work, and it's always entertaining. And it's just this thing where he has an understanding of, and I always thought it was basically the relationship between himself and Dean Devlin, where Emmerich was the guy who was out there blowing things up, and Dean was
so good, his
writer and his producer, who was like helping to pull strings in just the right way. And without Dean, he never becomes the force that he becomes in American blockbusters. It just never happens.
Is there a greater line in movie history than "Give my regards to King Tut, asshole"? I don't know if there's ever been a greater line in movie.
Yeah, by the way, great scores too. That
2012, I love that movie.
2012?
I think it's an incredible film. And it is really strange to have someone like John Cusack at the center of them. It feels very odd, but it really worked for me. I love that movie.
It's the way that Roland approaches these movies. He really does have a very unconventional eye for this stuff, which is very funny because he essentially helped create it. Where if you think about blockbuster, like, as far as we know what the form has become in the last 40, 50 years, then Top Gun is that's patient zero of the modern blockbuster. It has the color palette, it has the dynamic among the guys, it has the sort of vague military, background and goal ahead of it. It's the idea of shedding off self-doubt to find yourself in chaos. This is my dear friend Tucker Johnson and I did a series called The End of History about Ridley and Tony Scott, and we essentially hypothesized that all movies now are either Top Gun or Blade Runner. When you think about every major action movie of the last
if only that
while,
were true. Literally.
I mean, yeah, right? Yeah. Christ. That'd be great. It'd be something else. But yeah, no, but I mean, like that, like the dynamics inside of Top Gun repeat and repeat and repeat. And Jerry Bruckheimer, of course, has a hand in this because, I mean, we put it in our series that he was looking for little Tony Scotts everywhere. And thus we get Michael Bay, thus we get Dominic Sena, thus we get Simon West. And they make their movies. And Con Air has a bit of Top Gun to it, but like the color palette is a lot more earthy. But then he makes The General's Daughter, which looks exactly like Top Gun.
Looks exactly like Top Gun. That's really
movie.
And Scott Rosenberg was an uncredited
daughter
writer on that.
Oh, was he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he did a script polish.
Well, it's also like that movie, The General's Daughter, is also like a very, very fascinating and weird indictment of militarism in the way that this is
critical.
It is in an insane way, but it is. It's very critical. Where the idea that this woman, all but like forces herself to be in a position where she can be sexually assaulted to prove to her dad that she's you're right.
It's a
that is wild because I haven't seen it in maybe 20 years.
It's pretty damning about like gender politics in the military and things like that, right? Like,
obviously,
for a Paramount movie, it's kind of
that was
like
a 4-quadrant release. That movie, that had major
was it a Christmas
big
release?
Cast. Yeah.
Was it like a big
I don't remember when it came out, but
I don't
it was
remember.
a big deal.
Let's see if I can put this. Yeah, but it was a huge deal. And this is, after G.I. Jane, this comes out. And Oh, well, I just watched something else.
Suck my dick. Sorry, I just said every time. I love it so
much. It was a summer movie.
By the way,
General's daughter was June 18th.
My dad really wants me to do G.I. Jane on the show because we love G.I. Jane. So I couldn't find a justification, but I'll find some way to do it at some point.
Another reason that you guys should talk is that I don't know anyone as obsessed with Tony Scott as Phil Gawthorne. I mean, when we talked last Boy Scout, he got teary-eyed talking about how much he loves Tony.
I literally cried talking about he's my greatest hero, especially as a Brit and and what he accomplished. And you're right that this is all. Much of this was that Top Gun was set the template, right, for even down to that post credits sequence, right, where you see all the characters and they've all got nicknames as well, right? Yep. That's part of the fun of it, and the military fetishization, or this is like it's prison fetishization, etc. The shining chrome and all of that, and it's planes in the sky as well, right?
Oh yes.
One last thing I was just going to say about Cusack, and then I want to move on, that I thought was just really interesting, because as much as he is this very thoughtful, intellectual guy in person, and then that reads on screen as well, especially with these characters, is that, as you may or may not have come across, Danny Trejo famously pretty tough guy, right? Like, I think he was the boxing champion at San Quentin,
toughest guy to ever to open a taco stand, that's for sure.
Right. Absolutely.
Said that one of the toughest guys that he ever worked with, and he's worked with a lot, was John Cusack.
Yeah, that's right.
Really?
Cusack was trained by Benny the Jet, famous ultimate martial artist. And Cusack, even going back to Say Anything, if you remember, he's doing kickboxing in that movie, is a very accomplished kickboxer in real life. And in Gross Point Blank, you see there's a kick that he does and it's actually his mentor and trainer, Benny, who comes in as the other hitman trying to kill him.
That's right.
He does this incredibly athletic kick it's only for 1 second.
I remember it. Is it in the high school?
Yes, in the corridor, like where the lockers are. So Cusack's actually like quite a physical, he's tall as well, but he's actually very athletic. But Trejo said, he's like, you would never suspect that he could break your jaw, but he's the nicest guy in the world. But he could break your ribs. Yeah, which is kind of interesting. He just never plays that.
Guys? Yeah. Should we start a John Cusack podcast?
Please.
There you go.
Please.
Gross Point Pod.
There you go.
What a movie that is. We've still got a lot to cover, so I know we could talk about this all day. But I do want to move on to the villain of this piece. I mean, just when you think this, you could talk forever about every character.
But Cole Meany is the villain of this
ultimate villain. But the, superficially at least, and in a conventional sense, the main villain of this piece, and of course there are several, but the main one is John Malkovich as Cyrus the Virus Grissom. Where do we start? I mean, the fact that you get an actor of that caliber in a movie like this shows there was the changing tide of action cinema. We've kind of tracked it to some extent when you're seeing people like Jeff Bridges do Blown Away, and to a lesser extent Johnny Depp do Nick of Time, and actors that weren't necessarily associated with the action genre become drawn to it, and Cage being the main one, arguably.
Gary Sinise in Ransom is one of my favorite in this one. Ransom, a great movie.
A great movie. The great Ron, maybe Ron Howard's best movie, honestly.
It might be his best one. He made a couple that I really stand by. Rush is great. I love In the Heart of the Sea, but that's more of an Anthony Mantle movie than it is a Ron Howard movie. And then 13 Lives is fucking
13
incredible.
Lives is great. Yeah. No, totally.
That really was a very, very impressive piece of work as far as unemphatic direction goes. It is a movie almost bereft of sentimentality.
It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it truly is. I was stunned by how good and how suspenseful that was. But yeah, no, they get this is the era where the Steppenwolf guys are showing up in movies and being great villains because they've got all this amazing stage presence where they're used to being able to project this coiled intensity to the back of the house without fully overplaying their hand, and like the performances that these guys did are all in their way legendary, and the stories you hear about, the stuff that really made them and how much, in the same way that you would have loved to have seen the, original Kazan production of Streetcar or something, like you'd love to see the performances that put Malkovich and Sinise and those guys on the map. because it must have blown the doors off. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's like that intersection of Sam Shepard, John Malkovich, and Gary Sinise is like, I don't know. It's like dude juice on some level.
Right?
Like it just has this
we talked about
like,
Chicago the other week, at the Relic, and I was I wanted to move to Chicago for this reason because I felt like it was like Mecca. I was like drawn to it because of Steppenwolf.
Very much.
It is so interesting though. I mean, Malkovich had done In the Line of Fire, which was an Oscar-nominated movie.
One of the great performances.
Was a populist, a mainstream movie, but was a high level quality.
Yeah,
big crime bill movie. Yeah,
that's Clinton core all the way to the marrow.
but it's hard to understate. Now we're in a very different era, but having an actor of that. It's sort of like maybe a comp would be when Phil Seymour Hoffman does Mission Impossible 3. You're getting someone, you know what I mean? Like someone that's just elevates this villain to, transcendent heights.
Well,
right?
I think one thing that's really fascinating to that point, to bring it back to Die Hard, right, is that we have no relationship to Alan Rickman when he plays Hans Gruber, or the average audience did, unless you've been to the RSC, right?
Right.
You're not like,
where he performed alongside the Kathoga.
That's right. But by the same token, what's so smart about Malkovich's performance in this movie is that there's a little bit of, and I mean this in the best possible way, him looking around and being like, I'm fucking John Malkovich. I'm in this movie, right? Like this might be the movie where he achieves ultimate movie stardom because he's playing this villain and he's not really doing much to distance himself from that kind of like quietly angry, neurotic, look Clint Eastwood maybe look at the other actor and deliver the line, and like allows his like weirdo persona in the best way to deliver the character.
I think part of it was he really didn't want to be there. I think that really informed a lot of his performance decisions because there's a famous quote where he was talking, somebody was asking why he and Sam Jackson had never worked together, and Sam Jackson was like, "Oh, because he makes serious movies." He says, "I was in Con Air, sir."
Yeah, but I think he's going to be remembered for this as much as he's going to be remembered for In the Line of Fire because
absolutely,
he's incredible.
More so, I would say. As big as Line of Fire was at the time, I mean, you can really sort of chart the difference in just those 4 years, how much had changed in the American mainstream cinema. That you go from In the Line of Fire, which has a couple of nutty, outlandish elements of him being the ultimate, super CIA spook, the ones that everybody else is afraid of, and all this stuff. Where it is outlandish, certainly, but by the time you get to Con Air, that the word outlandish no longer has purchase. It no longer means anything. Like everything has there isn't a second of that movie that's grounded in what you would have considered cinematic reality only a couple of years ago. And it's so beautifully stylized all the way through. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think there's anything wrong with that in this particular context. I think some movies perhaps abused it, but I really don't think that there was anything wrong with it in this one. But that's, just between those two movies and how dogged in his pursuit of a kind of realism Wolfgang Peterson became as an image maker, where Air Force One is nonsense, but
the best kind of nonsense, though.
I mean,
it's coming up. It's coming up.
I'm sure, but but the thing is, pay attention to the way he lights that. It's not a Tony Scott lighting schema.
No.
It's not a Simon West lighting schema. And Line of Fire is the same way. These are streets and houses and cars and galas and everything that you recognize. These are not things outside of our reality.
It's not a field in the middle of Nevada or whatever the case might
exactly.
Right.
Yes. It's not a jet designed specifically to take prisoners to the moon or whatever. Speaking of which, you guys should cover Lockdown. That's sort of Die Hard.
Yeah.
That's
Aren't there 3 sequels to that?
It's on the list. Yeah.
Doesn't it have 3 direct-to-video sequels or something? Maybe I'm thinking of a different movie. But anyway, regardless,
entirely possible. I confess I didn't keep up. But
no, too bad. Okay.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you guys another question, because I am conscious of, we could talk about every single character in this film for a solid hour, and we were justified in doing so. But in the interest of time, there's a question that I often like to ask our guests and Liam when we do a classic Die Hard on a blank movie, as in Bad Guys Take Over a blank, which is, who's your favorite terrorist? And in this one, the question becomes, who's your favorite convict? So because there's so many, I want to pin you guys down to pick one member of the supporting cast that is that is one of the bad guys that's your favorite beyond Malkovich.
Liam, you want to go first?
Okay. My answer, and then Scout answers, I'm going to run away for one quick second, so just a heads up on that, but I'll be back. But my answer to this question is complicated because I don't know. However, I am going to go with, because I think we're going to talk about him later, I'm going to go with Dave Chappelle, specifically for the line when the guy says, I'm DEA. You know what that means? Dave Chappelle says, you're the most crooked person on this plane.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
That's my answer.
Joe Pinball Parker.
He's amazing. My dad
Dave Chappelle is in this movie.
My dad was obsessed with Dave Chappelle in this period.
It's just wild.
Because he did this legendary Letterman set when he pretended to be Mike Tyson and Arnold Schwarzenegger breaking into someone's house. And
that's right.
I had that episode of Letterman taped, and we used to watch that. So when he saw that Chappelle was in this, he was like, yes, here we go.
Great choice. I mean, just amazing. Just another icon, just casually
You're
in
the
this
most
movie.
Crooked guy on this plane. It's amazing.
Scout, who's your pick?
I mean, we talked about Diamond Dog, and I do love Ving Rhames and what a great performance and how much fun he's clearly having. But I got to give it up to Renoli Santiago as Sally Can't Dance. I really think that little extra bit of joie de vivre that character brings to the mix, it humanizes everybody, that they all are psyched that she's there. They're like wolf whistling and she's eating it up. I just, oh God, I love it. Like, I have absolutely no idea if that performance is even remotely progressive today or if it would pass muster. But man, I just think that actor is giving it his all. And I think that character is just so wonderful.
It's interesting with that, just speaking of that character, because there was a moment, and I think in some versions this has been cut out, and I think in the version that I have it was cut out. But at the end, when that character is essentially caught and confronted, she says, "Men in uniform."
Yes, yes.
And in some versions that's cut out, and you just see her breathing like heavily as the cops converge. Right. But it was sort of like kind of within the absurdity of this.
I loved it. I just loved it.
Movie.
But again, it's the indefatigable spirit of this crew that you can't get them down. No
it's
matter
such
what.
an important thing as well to be like, this is something that gets lost a lot. There's films that we've looked at that have done this really well, and there's films that have done it badly. And one of the best, Die Hard itself being one of the best ever examples. You kind of have to love the bad guys and enjoy hanging out with them.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yes. For these movies to transcend. Like, you really, like, they are so fun and often and hilarious. I mean, Cyrus the Virus is hilarious. I suppose I should do my pick there would be so many. I mean, I'm certainly partial to Billy Bedlam.
What's the name of that actor again?
I'm just going to pull it up.
Really do much else after this, did he?
I recognize
Nick Chinland.
I recognize him from something, and I can't.
He's in Eraser. I know he's like
maybe
funnily enough, a corrupt federal agent in that. MC Gainey, but for me, my pick would have to be Buscemi. I mean, it's got to be the Marietta Mangler, Garland Green.
I think too that I like the idea that in a movie like this, the circumstances are heightened because they're doing something other than just being in jail together. If this was just a movie where they're in jail, and I think following the Nick Cage character, it essentially is, where he's the first day on the yard, he's got to, impress everybody. Like, that very much is still the narrative for him. But because everybody else has a common goal that is about 10 leagues higher than their usual goal of just getting through the day, there's allegiances and there's fun and there's supports. It's like a little summer camp for psychos.
It's like Stagecoach. There are all these intersecting behaviors and alliances.
I agree with you, and I'm going to throw another one out at you. Frank Borzegi's Strange Cargo, from 1940, I want to say. That is the film that I think this most reminds me of, as far as the arc of prisoners getting away from a place. And then after this, the very joyless but very good Australian prison break movie Van Diemen's Land.
I've never seen that.
Oh, it's so good. It's basically if Con Air was no fun, but complimentary. It's
Con Air, but no fun. Complimentary.
That's right. Complimentary.
Brackets complimentary. I love it.
Yeah, they're prisoners in, I want to say, the late 19th century, fleeing a chain gang, and just being consumed by the Australian wilderness. Incredible stuff. That's like a lot of marvels of Australian cinema never talked about, but extremely good.
I also want to throw in as a prison, like an incredible recent prison movie, Brawl on Cell Block 99. That's stunning, like
fucking crazy.
Yeah,
dude.
It is.
Put Vince Vaughn in that guy's movies forever. Like they're politically repugnant, fist pumping action movies.
The other thing that I wanted to say too, the going back to the end credits having everybody smiling at you. I just rewatched Kelly's Heroes, which has a similar vibe to this, and that ends with the faces of everybody on the, so it's like it's a trope that goes back a lot of years.
Dirty Dozen, yeah. There you go.
See, that's why they do it. There you go. Perfect.
That's why I
could talk about John Cassavetes and Dirty Dozen for the rest of my natural life.
Well, it's the fun of a big ensemble, and I feel like look at one of the movies that just the most important and successful both box office and critical and awards of recent times was Oppenheimer, right?
Yeah, like The Boys.
Just a big, like Oliver Stone used to do it, with these big epics, and every 5 minutes, an incredible movie star turns up for a 10-minute part. And
Gary
it's like,
Oldman has one scene.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy.
So more of that, please, Hollywood.
Let's just talk something just very quickly about 90s nostalgia? I'm sorry, this podcast can be 4 hours long, but they should release Oppenheimer as a two VHS set. They should just put that out there because
see, this is my problem with Christopher Nolan is he doesn't know what fun is. He doesn't. He has no relationship.
We'll draw your attention to Tenet, but carry on. Yeah.
But he has no relationship to it. I think he understands that people have it. I just don't think he knows what it is. Because there are so many missed opportunities in the marketing of these things. And if he wasn't so breathless all the time about, the serious work of filmmaking, and don't get me wrong, it is serious work and he should take it seriously. But I just don't think
that's an interesting point.
I think that there's a chromosome missing. I think he's got this this boarding school, something happened, he fell and hit his head.
It's called being British, darling.
I was going to say, there's a great book about him called The Nolan Variations that gets into the kind of like schizophrenic identity he has as like American-born British boarding school raised.
I thought for sure you were going to say something like, there's a great book about him, it's called Under the Volcano.
Yeah, but that would be a smart move. Release it as a double set. But yes, that might be too much fun. I know what you mean. I know exactly. That's why I love him. Partially why I love him, because it's like, come on, loosen up, let's go. Stop being so anxious about being alive all the time.
Love of God, please.
Let's talk about the action. We've got a couple of bits more to cover. Just briefly, I think it's worth discussing. Okay, we've talked about what makes this film special: the tone, the actors, the concept. But let's talk about the action itself, which I think is pretty exemplary. But it struck me that although you were saying, it's interesting because you were saying, you thought this was quite a composed film. I think the actual set pieces are, I think, intentionally quite chaotic. What I mean by that is if you think about some of the iconic moments in Die Hard, jumping off McClane jumping off Nakatomi Plaza,
right.
The bus jump across the broken freeway in Speed, or the shot in The Rock where the F-16 flies towards the camera as the bombs drop. Those to me feel
amazing. One of the greatest shots ever. Amazing.
They feel very clean and quite sort of tailored in the sense of like, it's interesting like that Tom Ford moved into filmmaking, because I actually think there's a like comparison between fashion design and film in like clean lines and, but those moments are very clean. Whereas this film I can't think of a shot like that in this film. It has the more frenetic quality that like some of Tony Scott stuff does, where it's like he's capturing chaos rather than designing the chaos. And, the chaos is happening over there and I've got 10 cameras shooting it and we see what we get. You know what I mean? It kind of, for me, it has some of that. That's not a criticism, or it's just a different, it's just a different style of approach to it. And a lot of Bay stuff isn't necessarily as, I think his stuff is, because he's very influenced by, Tony and everything. Some of his stuff is more like that. Let's capture the madness. But I can't think of a shot like that in this film. Maybe the smashing of the casino stuff, or when the final descent. But just your thoughts on how this functions purely as as an action film, and any favorite stunts, set pieces, moments. Interested to get your thoughts on it.
I think you're right about that. Ultimately, that I think that the sort of the composedness of it, I think, is a diving board off of which the chaos then comes up, and it becomes more pointillist in the way of a Michael Bay action set piece, or or a Dominic Sena or a Tony or something like that, where you've got all the cameras capturing things, and you get little moments of repose in that. Like there are great moments where I forget which one of the guys it is. It's like it's either Viking or somebody, or the Native American character who's shot and falls, and then the frame catches them beneath a grate, and it's there to catch them, and then zoom like comes back down out as we like see the dead body on this grate piece and all that. I think it's sort of, at that point it's a composition about motion, and I think that you're right about that. Or like the insane, sort of like polystyrene dummy that they must have melted when they blow up Sandino in the plane, and how upsetting that shot is.
Yeah.
It doesn't fuck around.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's showing, it's pretty, that bit's intense.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I think that there is chaos when it comes to that stuff. I think that because he sets it up so carefully, because I think he knows he can control that in a way that he can't necessarily, because my guess is, the budget is only going to cover so many shooting hours or whatever, and you're just going to start blowing things up, and it's tough to control when you've got that many explosives going off. So you just sort of have the 10 cameras rolling and get what you can, and then later fill it with the little moments that I like. The things that feel more directly pulled from like a comic, or, in his case, a music video version of momentum, which is what I really appreciate.
And this film has that in spades. And
absolutely.
I suppose, as another example to illustrate this point, it's like how this difference from like a John Woo film, in the sense that John Woo is like a choreographer, right?
Very much.
That stuff feels very musical and carefully rehearsed. I'm sure this is, but it doesn't have that vibe. Well, it's in quite the same way.
The John Woo stuff,
it's not necessarily pretty.
No, it's not.
Because it's more about the overall feeling than the individual shot, I think.
Absolutely. And,
cumulative effect.
The thing that I noticed in the way that Woo films action is he does this kind of 1, 2, 3 schema. It's like ABA almost, where it's, let's say Chow Yun-fat steps onto the booth in the restaurant and fires a gun in this direction, and then there's a shot of like gunfire coming for him, and that is in slow motion as he dodges it, and then the answer shot is back in the regular speed as he hits the ground. So it's, you've set the thing up, and then the motion is beautiful, and then the fall is kind of graceless, because it's it's reality, it's style, real, it's reality. And it's one of the great ways of capturing action, because it relishes in the beauty and purity of the choreography of the stunt, while also allowing you to feel the sort of like wincing as the bullets are whizzing by and everything. And this is obviously a much less precise version of that, because, again, you're not dealing with, a couple of these guys were stuntmen, obviously, but for the most part, it's guys like Bing Rams and John Malkovich and Nicolas Cage, and they'll do what is asked of them, but they're not, the kind of people that you can count upon to do exactly the very specific things that are called upon in this.
Can I approach this from a different angle that I've spent a couple minutes while you guys have been talking, dutifully listening, but also reminding myself that the editor of this movie, Chris Lebenzon, and there is a team of editors, it is a legend. This is the third movie that he has edited that we've covered on this podcast. The first one is The Last Boy Scout, and the second, Be Still Phil's Heart, and the second one, Be Still My Heart, is Crimson Tide. And what I think is, he also edited Top Gun and Beverly Hills Cop, right? And so I think that this movie, weirdly, as an editing project, is a weird fusion of some sensibilities, because this movie contains incredible action, and action that is all over the place, but it also has witty dialogue exchanges. There's times when it's just people talking to each other, a la Crimson Tide, which is like Die Hard but a play on some level. It has this kind of like chamber piece drama quality. And so I think the fact that he's so good at cutting people giving each other shit, a la The Last Boy Scout and Crimson Tide in a different tone, combined with the fact that when you're a music video director like Simon West, you got to know how to cross-cut, because no one is just watching a performance on, most music videos made at this level are
these
really...
films, the Simpson Brookhaven thing was like, we will never allow you to be bored.
Yeah.
Whether it's 5 seconds, a funny line, a great shot, a dynamic action sequence, a brilliant performance.
Yeah, and the cross-cutting...
will never let you get bored.
My favorite sequence in this entire movie is the ambush in the oil field, the yard.
The boneyard.
Right? The boneyard, thank you, yeah. And the fact that that's cross-cutting...
That's a rock.
That's a rock. And the fact that that's cutting against Cage trying to get the needle for the insulin, and Santiago trying to escape, it's like a cacophony of insanity. But the biggest compliment you can give this movie is you're never like, where are we in space? Where are we in time? Like, you understand. A great trick.
You know exactly what you need to.
Totally. And a great trick of this movie that I to point out something that stuck out with me the 5th time I've seen it is like, Nick Cage's wife lives in Alabama. Somehow she gets to where Cusack is, and somehow she also gets to the strip in Las Vegas with 45 minutes notice. And never once are you like, how's that work, right? Like, it allows you to suspend your disbelief about time and space, because the execution, and I think particularly the cutting, is done by such pros that you're just along for the ride. And you don't care. The biggest argument is if you think of this stuff, you don't care.
The editing is kind of the unsung hero of this.
Totally.
To your point about like the propulsion of the movie. I wanted to just talk about, because we could talk about this all day, and we kind of are heading in that direction. I want to just, one thing I want to say in addition to your point about the chamber piece drama of it all, if I don't get to write the Con Air sequel, I would love to write the stage adaptation of Con Air. So, if anybody's interested
what would it, what would it be called? Like, what would be the vibe?
Get all the original cast back. Well, with an exclamation mark. No, let's go for something a bit more serious. The Glengarry version. Let's talk about the humor as our last tenet of anatomy of an action movie.
Do we have 3 hours?
Question: is this film actually a black comedy with action?
Yes.
More than it is an action movie.
Yes.
I agree. I mean,
it's funnier than most comedies. Like,
just
legit.
Just the premise of it is something that is so heightened that you can't be sitting there thinking like, okay, well, what, if this were really happening, it's like, no, no. They got names like Viking and Mongoose and everything. Like, it's just, it is absolutely a comedy about our worst fears come to life. I'm trying to even think of what it comes from, like we talk about Kelly's Heroes. It comes from the tradition of World War II movies like The Dirty Dozen, and where it's all these guys in a thing. And The Dirty Dozen is a comedy, and it's also a black comedy because it's Robert Aldrich, and he had that very bleak, dark sense of humor.
By the way, I think Die Hard is kind of a black comedy too.
I don't even think it's a black comedy. I think
respects.
it's just a comedy. Like I think that movie's very funny.
Yeah.
And like, like Alan Rickman is funny all the way through, and
I mean, you can draw a line between Rickman's wit and Malkovich's wit as both icons of the stage and that sort of piercing intelligence that they convey as well. But yeah, there's a cool mixture of actually really smart humor and really stupid humor.
Can I give you a great example of this that I think like exemplifies why 90s mainstream action cinema is so good? Is when Cyrus says to the guard, "What's the in-flight movie today?" And the guard says, "Well, I think you'll like it, Cyrus. It's called I'll Never Make Love to a Woman on the Beach Again." And it's preceded by the award-winning short, "No More Steak for Me Ever."
No more steak for me ever.
You have this guard who kind of seems to understand, like, you go to the cinema, you get a short, like, it's so smart. It imbues these characters. That guy's the shittiest guy in the movie.
I mean, he's a brilliant character.
It's a great performance.
And the fact that the movie makes time for this exchange just goes to show you that, like, we're having fun here. We're also pretty smart. And, like, there's a hilarity to the cruelty that this movie kind of plays at. This movie is very good.
Wow. Let's we usually take our final break before the last section of the show, but I'm going to suggest, because we've gone a little long in the midsection, we will take it now. So we're going to come back. We're going to get on our tuxedos and we're going to come back for the Die Hard Oscars after this quick break. And we're back with the Die Hard Oscars, aka the Action Movie Awards.
You guys put on your jumpsuits, your orange jumpsuits.
Of course, naturally.
My spit guard. So our first award is and this is a tough one.
Yeah,
the John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line. So many nominees. I picked 4 here, but feel free to add. This is kind of a tossed off line, but like something I really want to remember to say this. When Cyrus goes, "The last guy who told me to have patience, I burned him down and bagged his ashes." It's just like casually phenomenal, like Malkovich stuff. The line that you referenced earlier, Scout, where Cameron Poe goes, "Sorry, boss, there's only 2 men I trust. One of them's me. The other's not you."
The other's not you.
That's a good line.
Genius. It stands to reason that the other one isn't you, a man I just met.
Incredible. I also think it's important, the line that is a kind of punch the air line, not necessarily like brilliant in its lyricism or anything, but when Cameron beats up Johnny 23 and goes, "Don't treat women like that."
Now, if I may, he says "weemen." Don't treat weemen like that.
I love that moment, and I know it's also partly to do with like this him being Southern and ideas of chivalry, etc. But from a character standpoint, but also it's like just such a great moment. But for me, of course, there is only one winner, which is
put the bunny
back in the box. I mean, that's the line this movie is remembered for. But you have any additions, thoughts, picks? Best line?
My favorite line in the movie is either the degree of civility in a society can be judged by observing its prisoners, because I think that that's like a key to this movie. But my second one, and if you'll allow me, now you're talking semantics. What if I told you Insane was working 50 hours a week in some office for 50 years, at the end of which they tell you to piss off, ending up in some retirement village, hoping to die before suffering the indignity of trying to make it to the toilet on time? Wouldn't you consider that to be insane? Cameron Poe, murdering 30 people, semantics are not as insane. Garland Green, one girl I drove through 3 states wearing her head as a hat. Like, that is just, it's just,
it encapsulates the madness of the movie.
Yeah, and also like what the movie may be getting at a little bit about like what we think about normal behavior, and Cameron Poe just not knowing what to do when he's confronted with like actual lunacy. I just think it's
real insanity.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. That moment.
This is a brilliantly written film, and the dialogue is spectacular. Like scene after scene, line after line. We could go on all day. Let's do. Oh, sorry. Did you have something?
I'll just funnily, one of those movies that I think has been so subsumed by culture now that you go back and you watch it and you realize how much of its influence has sort of like trickled down into other action films and stuff. I want to say that one of my favorites, it's not a big showy line or whatever, but when Malkovich is it was the one we were talking about where he says this is the, these are the trucks, this is the boneyard, and the Viking says what's that? He says, that's a rock. But also he starts it off by saying, considering my audience, I'm gonna make this quick and I'm gonna make this I love that so much.
I know we're gonna go forever,
brilliant.
but like one last thing that I think is actually so like if you can buy into this movie, the scene where Cage reunites with Monica Potter and his daughter is actually quite touching, and that Trisha Yearwood song is doing a lot of work. But I
want to write that for this movie, by the way?
I have to assume. I'm not sure, but I do.
That's nuts if that's true.
I do have to give Cage credit for pulling off "I meant to get a haircut," which is a thing he says. Because like in a lesser actor's hands, that would be like, "I meant to get a haircut," but he kind of says it as the befuddled buffoon. This guy, like, I meant to get a haircut.
The genius. I actually wanted to say this on the Cameron Poe section, but I, because you've touched on it, I feel like I actually have undersold how much I love, unironically, Nicolas Cage, and how he can sell that moment where the movie goes from complete madness and black comedy craziness to real sentimentality, but because he is so sincere and truthful in that moment,
there's nothing he can't do with
Peggy
sentimentality.
Sue got married.
Oh,
I mean, I just watched, Long Legs the other day, and I was just so inspired by like the Nicolas Cage is like been in this business for however many years. We're probably talking 35 plus years, and came out pretty hot, and is still innovating, experimenting, taking risks, pushing the form. I just think he is such a gift to the world. And if you can't if you're not a massive Nicolas Cage fan, I can't. Yeah, I cannot understand it. Like he's amazing.
This culture has such a fixation on opinions it formed 20 years ago for some reason. So many people have this sort of cultural arrested development that I find so stultifying, where people still like doing the old fucking Shyamalan jokes and everything. It's like, no, man, the world has changed. We are not living in 2003 anymore. We are not running off the fumes of the blockbuster moment. And Nicolas Cage is not the guy who made Bangkok dangerous. Like,
totally.
We're just not. We're not in that place anymore. And he has such a sense of humor about himself, and he has pulled himself out of a bad moment in his career to continue to give people really, really entertaining singular performances. And even still, to read reviews of Long Legs or whatever, or just like little comments on it, where like, Nicolas Cage, he's been bad forever. I was like, no, I'm sorry. This is a risky performance. Like, does it work all the way through? That is entirely up to you. But this is not bad work. This is not blindly whatever. He's not following the craziest impulse. He's following the impulse that is the most challenging and the most interesting. And, I just find him
I agree. I think that's the most innovative performance, original, bold, risky performance I've seen in a really long time. And for me, it completely worked. I think it was terrifying from the first shot where you don't even really see him, what he's doing with his voice. That shot is
absolutely magnificent.
Amazing. Well, I thought that was great, but
so good.
I just feel like we haven't given him quite enough love.
God, this episode is amazing. Can I also just say that, like, I think, Scout, to your point, that a frustration that anyone who grew up in this period holds is that, like, not everything has to be a riff on something that existed 30 years ago. And so it's interesting with this movie because the second you see Buscemi, the first thing you think about is Silence of the Lambs, which is like maybe is the kickoff point of like the serial killer obsession that we all have. And so when you get most actors, they're going to say, okay, I'm playing Long Legs in a movie called Long Legs. What are my antecedents to this? And what's so special about Nicolas Cage is nothing like this has ever been done before.
Exactly. It's innovation.
Like it's like it's actually like he goes in the opposite direction of what
pushing the art form forward.
And he has no vanity.
The craft forward.
No vanity. I mean, like, can you imagine? He's a handsome dude now. Like, he's still good looking. And the fact that he just makes I'm going to put on this wig and I'm going to look like a pig. And I'm like, it's a really amazing. And then I want to shout out one other underrated Nicolas Cage movie, Mandy, which has a one-shot scene of him grieving that I think is one of the most amazing 60 seconds in a movie of the past 10 or 15 years.
I mean, I could go on all day about
I was going to say,
the Bad Lieutenant
Yes!
movie where he also plays a
good
southern, a southern character that's like taking gigantic risks.
I like that. This is maybe sacrilegious.
I
like that version more than the original, and I like the original.
Me too. I
can't join you there.
That's fair.
And I just wrote the booklet essay for a Harvey Keitel box set that Imprint put out, and I watched it again, and I just immersed myself in Harvey, and so I have to give it up. I got to give
Harvey's
him
incredible.
The
Don't get me wrong.
He's so fucking good. Like that performance is like. That's like it's truly it's like watching something religious take place. It is just such a special performance. But to your point, the Cage performance in Bad Lieutenant is remarkable, and it's again I defy somebody other than I'm going to give you Pay the Ghost or possibly the Bureau or the whatever that movie is called, the something Bureau, the Humanity Bureau. Other than those two movies. Of the 100 or so movies that Cage has been in, tell me a time you were bored by his acting.
Oh, yeah, no, never. Of course
exactly.
Not. Yeah.
I just watched Knowing again. That's a beautiful
I like that
movie.
movie. Yeah, incredible ending in that movie.
Yeah, oh my God. And it's just his he has to tell his son, I can't join you in the future. You have to go and live your life without me. He has to say this to him, and he does a fucking beautiful job with such a heartbreaking note. He's one of the greats. He's just
one of the great artists in this medium.
And I agree. I think
he knows exactly what it calls for.
He also understands that actors use their body to express, and I think so. I mean, that's obvious to say, but I think a lot of actors take that as almost an excuse to not do very much. And sometimes that's appropriate. But Cage does
Malkovich
so
here,
much.
Malkovich
here is a great example of that. But Cage is should have been in a wooden building in Poland in the 70s, rolling around on the ground with Jerzy Kratowski. But what we actually get from him is I'm in mainstream Hollywood movies, and it's phenomenal.
It's he's
so
terrific.
I'm glad that we kind of we touched
carved out a minute for that.
Yeah,
kind of amazing. We carved out a minute for Nicolas Cage and Con Air. That speaks to you about how rich this movie actually is.
One quick side note that is sort of neither here nor there, but is about everything we're talking about. When Cage, looking for the insulin, finds himself under a truck with an old man, that old man is character actor Dabbs Greer, who was a favorite of Don Siegel and was in, among other things, the movie Riot in Cell Block 11, one of the great prison movies. And this I can't help but feel is why he's in this film. That is a great piece of agitprop. That was Walter Wanger had shot his wife's lover in the dick and done time for it, and he came out with a fervor about reforming prisons, and he wanted them to be better because he saw them as inhumane because he'd spent time there. So together, he and Siegel made Riot in Cell Block 11, which is a great movie and has at its core Neville Brand giving a very Nicolas Cage, very Harvey Keitel performance as the leader of the riot. It's a great movie, and it's a great movie about how the pigs will every single time pull the wool over your eyes and sell you out. Great fucking movie.
Oh man, I've not seen that one. I gotta watch that. My dad introduced me to Don Siegel, so I have a relationship, but I have not seen that one.
It's the A side to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's very much a similar movie about groupthink and about fighting powers that have outwitted you, and just wanting your humanity back. They're both really, really beautiful pieces about that. Yeah, so can't recommend that highly enough.
Well, they're playing the music here for us at the Oscars, so I better I better keep the pace going. No, shut up! I'm making a speech. I love when Ridley Scott did that, and he was just like, no. Carrying on. Sorry. No. Never change, Rid.
Fuck you.
I'm Ridley Scott.
I love you to death.
Off.
Oh, I love him. Oh,
the Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film. My goodness, I had to narrow it down to 5.
I was gonna say.
Here are the 5 I've picked. You can add whoever you want if your choice is not on here. But I've got Ving Rhames as Diamond Dog, Rachel Ticotin as Guard Sally Bishop, who we haven't really talked about.
She's been in more movies we've talked about than almost anyone else.
Dave Chappelle as Pinball Parker.
Chappelle for sure.
MC Gainey as Swamp Thing. And Steve Buscemi as Garland Green.
I gotta add Sally Can't Dance to that as well, because every scene that she's in is just perfect. It was, what do you want me to do?
Men in uniform.
Yeah, that's right. go to the boneyard. Anybody gets past you, scratch their eyes out. You got it. Like, incredible work.
I like how the convicts are the only ones to treat Sally Can't Dance as an equal, and Poe has to slap her in the face. I think there's something interesting about that.
Also, you got to hand that performance note. The shriek that Ranoli emits when having been struck is priceless. It's so good. That's a great performance. The whole movie, great performance, top to bottom.
All right, who's your pick, guys?
Garland Green.
Garland Green, yeah.
Yeah, I think for stealing, absolutely. I mean, he comes in and he is somehow even more interior than Cage and Malkovich and Cusack and everybody else. He is.
I mean, I'd love to measure his screen time because I imagine it's maybe like 12 minutes?
Yeah,
probably
something like that, right?
Probably.
And like casts such a huge shadow and kind of gets literally the last laugh.
Yeah.
You know, with the final shot. So that would be my pick too. I only have one nominee for this category, even though I could have gone all day, for the Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie. For me, it has to be Cole Meany as DEA agent Duncan Malloy. Because I think it's worth just touching on the fact that he is this movie's equivalent of Robert Davi as Big Johnson from Die Hard, right? That just super arrogant, you know, gung-ho, like, let's send in the choppers and an assault team, you know, and just like doesn't listen to anybody, is a fucking prick, you know, and for me, he just runs away with that award.
It's telling that you like that guy less than a guy named Johnny 23 who's named for the number of rapes that he has committed.
Gosh,
when you wake up, guard, I'm gonna be Johnny 24.
Oh,
so dark, so dark. The best death presented by a hillbilly, Marco.
Shit.
Potentially.
Put the bunny in the box. No more table. Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate. Very quickly, I'm so sorry, but do you guys remember on the Con Air website there was a browser game you could play where you played as Cameron Poe and you fought Billy Bedlam for the rabbit, for the bunny?
I'm afraid
I played it over and over again before the movie.
No way.
Because that was when you'd go to a movie's website to learn more about the movie, and they had like a scrolling game where you fought Billy Bedlam in the bottom of the plane, and I used to play it over. It was like a 4-minute game, and I played it 55 times. It sucked, and I played it 55 times.
Incredible
I'm
stuff.
obsessed with those, like, I try and, because I collect, like, retro games and stuff sometimes, and I always get these, like, conversions of, you know, just because I love, like, titled ones, like Total Recall and Universal Soldier.
Sure.
The games all absolutely suck.
Yeah, they're all bad.
Terrible. But I love the like just seeing it digitized, just seeing Governor Cohagen digitized is enough. It's like
So I very quickly tried to find this game, and I found a Game Facts feed about did Cameron Crowe get railroaded by the legal system. So other deep thinkers about Con Air are out there. Oh my God.
So best death, I've picked 3. There are many. I've got Cyrus killing DEA agent Willie Sims. Cyrus killing the drug lord Cindino by flicking the cigarette onto the jet fuel.
Onara.
And Cyrus getting pummeled by a conveniently placed pile driver. How did that end up there? Can anyone explain how they were on the Vegas Strip and suddenly they're in like a construction yard?
It's Hallmark movie.
What's going on there?
Hallmark movie. That's the movie we're watching.
It's worth pointing out from a geographic standpoint, they go from Las Vegas to a tunnel in Los Angeles. There is no tunnel in Las Vegas. There is no fucking underground.
Wonder about that. Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
Is that the tunnel downtown in LA? It must be.
Yeah, the one that Blade Runner shoots in and everything, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's in everything. It's in Charlie's Angels. It's in Transformers. That and the LA River are probably the most photographed pieces of LA.
That's true. Wow. I didn't even make that connection.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that clearly what was happening was that they were constructing a tunnel from Vegas to Los Angeles, and that's why
That's Con Air 2. That's it's Nick Cage gets caught in the tunnel.
In the tunnel, yes. Like THX.
Isn't like Tunnel like the name of a fake movie in Seinfeld? No, that's Chunnel. Anyways, okay.
Chunnel, yeah.
Chunnel.
Tunnel is a pretty good South Korean disaster film.
Oh, good. Wow, okay. Yeah, so much stuff to watch. I knew this was going to happen. Scout was
Daylight 2? Said
Daylight
no one
2.
ever?
No, wow. No thanks.
Yeah, we're good.
Well, my theory about Daylight...
As far as Rob Cohen movies go, I like Hurricane Heist way better.
Are you kidding me with this guy?
Need to get married.
Are you kidding me with this guy?
Hurricane Heist comes up on every
That completes your bingo card. Congratulations.
You're now married, according to the rules.
That's right. I gotta ask also though, Geostorm. Are you a Geostorm fan?
Geostorm. I do like a bit of
Geostorm.
I like a bit of Geostorm.
That's a good rainy day movie for me.
I like Jared Butler in a suit giving testimony to Congress.
Oh yeah.
Or whatever it is. So best death. I mean, I'm picking Cyrus's death because it's like so prolonged and protracted, and ridiculous.
I gotta go with the way Cindino goes down because of the iconic sayonara.
I think I got to give that the edge. I really do.
It's just so
it's them walking away from the explosion to
90s shit.
And he's the only one that doesn't flinch, Malkovich. While the rest of them are like, whoa,
Swamp Thing looking over his shoulder.
That shot is really iconic, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, well that does it for the Oscars. We have one more section of the show, which should be pretty fun, which is the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz, where the scores can really change. I'm going to ask you guys 3 quiz questions, and you can collaborate. You're going to work together. You get 1 clue each. You can phone a friend, aka you can radio Al Powell.
I'm going to call John
Question
Cusack.
number 1: which member of the Die Hard cast turned down the role of Cyrus the Virus Grissom?
Is he British?
Nope.
Oh.
Who were you thinking?
Rickman.
Okay.
It's
just
not
like the
Willis, is it?
The obvious.
Is it Bruce Willis?
It's Bruce Willis.
The answer is Bruce Willis.
Holy
According to an
shit.
excellent article in Empire magazine written by Alex Godfrey about the making of the film, producer Jerry Bruckheimer approached Bruce Willis first for the part of Cyrus. They would, of course, go on to work together the next year in Armageddon. Other actors who read for the part included Tom Sizemore, Willem Dafoe, and Mickey Rourke. All of whom you can totally see, at least somewhere. Right?
Rourke and Dafoe would have done great.
Sizemore as Billy Bedlam for me would just
that would have been great.
What I think is special about the idea of Willis as Cyrus is that I feel like that's one of those, he goes in a door and his career goes in a different direction. That I just think is so, like, the idea of Bruce even playing a villain is really
It's interesting because we're coming up to a movie where he kind of made that pivot with the Jackal.
Right.
As the...
But you still love, like,
he's the lead, it's like the Terminator, right?
Right.
It's like he's the lead character, he's the title character, so it's kind of interesting. Question number 2. The premiere of this film took place at an unusual location that was actually featured in the film.
I'm going to say Hard Rock
yes.
Casino.
What famous establishment? I didn't even have a chance to finish. What famous establishment did Con Air have that premiere? The answer is absolutely correct. It's the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. Listen to this. Again, I got this from the same article that was just so fascinating. I don't usually do this, but this was so good. I had to read this. So guests at the Con Air premiere, guests were flown in from LA on a 737, arrived on the tarmac in Vegas, were shouted at by prison guards, in quotes, who shoved them all onto fake prison buses with batons. At the Hard Rock, a replica of Con Air's plane had supposedly crashed into a pop-up cinema. Guests were led through the plane into a tunnel that housed prison cells, behind which prisoners shouted at them and gave them popcorn. And just before showtime, guards shoved a prisoner onto the stage who was dressed in an orange jumpsuit wearing a spit guard. The prison officers pulled off the spit guard, revealing Jerry Bruckheimer, who duly introduced the film.
That's fucking insane.
That's 90s core. That's like the shadow of 90s.
Planet Hollywood.
All
the way through.
Yeah.
However, it's what it is. It's the restaurant in The Simpsons in the episode where Marge gets a job at the power plant. It's the train that derailed and they get led to their table by the headless brakeman.
The spruce caboose.
Yes, the spruce caboose.
So very quickly, guys.
They said it would never take off, and say, "All right."
You go to the movie theater. You're watching a movie that takes place at a premiere where there are actors pretending to be prisoners leading the audience in. Nicolas Cage is there. John Malkovich is there. Ving Rhames is there. They're all there. But instead of Jerry Bruckheimer being revealed, it is a prisoner himself, and that is Con Air 2. Con Air 2 takes place at the premiere of Con Air.
What you're basically describing is the movie Demons, which is fine, of course. Nothing wrong with that.
That would be the Die Hard at a movie premiere. Come on.
That would be good.
Actually,
Well,
Last
it's
Action
also
Hero
good.
has that a little bit.
Last Action Hero, a little bit of femme fatale as well, which is a top 5 De Palma.
Late
All right,
late period De Palma.
our final main question here, and this has come up, but let's see if you can get your heads together to work this out. 3 members of the Con Air cast previously appeared in Michael Mann's Heat. Can you name the 3 actors who connect both films?
Well, it's definitely Danny Trejo for sure. That's number 1 with a bullet.
That's number 1.
Mykelti Williamson.
Mykelti Williamson, that's right. He's great.
Correct, as Drucker.
And then
And Baby-O in this film.
It's not Gainey.
No, it's Waingro. We talked about it up
Oh
top.
yeah, Kevin Gage.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep, Kevin Gage is an uncredited appearance as was Waingro, of course, in Heat. And here, I don't know if his character is actually named. He's just
Billy Joe.
Yeah, Redneck.
Oh yeah, Billy Joe. That's right.
I have a
Drunken
bonus
bar
question
patron.
per our conversation earlier, which is actor Nick Chudland, who plays Billy Bedlam, appeared in what great 3rd installment of a classic American action movie franchise?
I know this.
What is it?
Well, I'll give it to. I'll give the option.
I'll give you a
to
clue
Scout.
if you need it.
Is it Die Hard 3?
Not Die Hard, another equally iconic franchise. It's Lethal Weapon 3. I don't remember him in the movie. He's also in Training Day.
I
So
think
he had
he's
a
one
little
of Nick Chinland. I think is one of like Stuart Wilson's goons.
Does Rene Russo
as I
beat the shit out
recall.
of him in the hottest sequence in movie history?
You know that bit where they're pulling away and he's
Yeah.
like one of the guys shooting at them as the cop. Because 3 is my favorite. I'll throw one more. I'll throw one last one at you guys just for fun, for shits and gigs, including all the off-screen deaths that are mentioned as a result of the various criminals' previous crimes.
Oh my God.
Would you like to take a guess at how many unnatural deaths were involved in Con Air, according to the Con Air Wikipedia page?
Are we doing Price is Right rules?
What's that? Get close?
One.
The closest?
Closest without going over.
What's the award? The bunny?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
There you
get
go.
the bunny.
You get a dirty
It's
bunny
wet.
that's
It's
picked
wet.
up from the sewer.
What is,
The
he goes for
smiley
the
face
bunny
sticker.
instead of the money. He just got out of jail. Like, this guy's insane.
Well, this is
500.
again the code of honor. I'm gonna go 250.
Liam?
500.
The answer is 126 humans and
Well, we
one
both
dog.
lose then. I almost went
One dog
150,
killed
but
by Billy Bedlam.
That's right.
Billy
the
Bedlam.
killed the parents.
So
Apparently-
not a nice man.
Jason
not a nice man.
Isaacs auditioned for this role as well. I just
Right,
learned.
and he went on to be in Armageddon as well.
Right, and the
next year.
Patriot. He's the world's biggest piece of shit in the
Bruckheimer,
Patriot. No
joint.
offense to yes, offense to British imperialism. But
Well,
Wow,
it's the-
but you
the one-
Massachusetts guys ganging
That's
up
right.
on me
Yeah,
here.
of course. Well, that's the one thing that I got from Mark Kermode's podcast, which I used to listen to a lot, is every time I see Jason Isaacs, I have to say, and hello to Jason Isaacs.
is that
Well,
it? Good.
guys, that amazingly we've come to the end of the
I can't believe
of
we
the
talked for
road.
such
We
a
hope
short
you
amount of
enjoyed
time.
your flight.
It's only been 3 days.
Incredible. Well, just so much to discuss. This has been fantastic. Scout, what do you have going on? Like, do you have any anything? I mean, we mentioned your book, but anything you want to plug where you write and
Absolutely. So please go to my Patreon, patreon.com/honorszombie. That's also my handle on all of the social media things. It's either honorszombie or honors_zombie, as it is on Twitter. I got 2 books you can buy: Cinemophagy on the psychedelic classical form of Toby Hooper, or But God Made Him a Poet, which Liam is very, very kindly modeling for me. Watching John Ford in the 21st Century from With an X Books, a great indie publisher out of Cleveland, run by my friend John Nix.
Can I read one line from this book, that your introduction, that really moved me, and I think it'll move Phil too? Because this actually is like the core of this podcast. Which is, you say, I want to thank my dad for showing me The Searchers when I was too young to understand it, but just old enough to be transfixed by it. Which is like the essence of what, because I saw these movies too young. I had a very like liberal father who was like, didn't think about if I could handle them. And I give him credit for like kicking off the fact that I like started to do plays and theater, because like at too young of an age, I was exposed to things that like I probably, in quotes, shouldn't have been. But I think that that's the core to like my survival in life, is being exposed to things at too young of an age and falling in love with an art form that like I didn't understand, but it like got into my bones before I even really knew what I was watching.
Absolutely. I think a good many lives lived in obsession were born in exactly this way, and I certainly have my dad to thank for that. It was, that was our household. There was always a movie on, and when there wasn't a movie on, there was usually a soundtrack on. So just constant,
Yeah.
sensory immersion in the act of creation. I was extremely fortunate for 100 reasons to have the childhood that I did.
Yeah.
Um,
My daughter's
yeah.
getting to the age where I'm like, she's about to turn 7. I'm like, I gotta start
Mm.
like, now's the time to start front loading her with
Making her watch Con Air.
Yeah, exactly. But just like getting her exposed to like stuff that's like a little like she already watches Scooby Doo, which I think is like
There
very
you go.
positive because like
Sure.
she's getting this old cartoon, so it's very special, and I'm loving the book so far, and like I'm just so
Thank
glad
you.
that we finally connected.
Oh yeah,
in this way.
this was a long time coming, and I'm so grateful that I got to come on here and talk to both of you guys. This is so fun.
Couldn't think of a better guest for this movie, to be honest.
Thank you so much.
You tell us your socials, your social handles and stuff. And
yes, I'm honors underscore zombie on Twitter, honors zombie on Instagram and Blue Sky. I think I'm private on Instagram, but I let everybody through. I did that because the drummer in my high school band is schizophrenic, and he used to send me death threats. So we were it was real good. But
Nice.
I have 2 video essay series that I'm very proud of from the last 2 years. Tucker and I made them. One of them is The End of History, which is all about Ridley and Tony Scott, 10-part series about their impact on culture and their lives as artists and their stamp as artists. Very proud of that. We have an episode that was really my baby, episode 6, about cinema after 9/11 and how crucial Ridley and Tony were
Yes.
to oh, thank you. Yeah, that was
do you talk about Boy and Bicycle? The
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, we talk
yeah.
about the whole of Ridley's corpus.
I love that.
Because Boy and Bicycle, obviously, that's the blueprint for so much of it, where, you see Blade Runner in that movie, you see The Last Duel in that, you just see his relationship to landscape and how much growing up in that part of England really informed everything that he understands about that, and the ways that he strives to be past it. Like, it's impossible not to see that kid shooting a movie with his brother, and first of all, be insanely moved by it, but then also get to 1995 when they buy a controlling interest in Pinewood Studios, and you're like, just from that little movie with his, with their bike, they now are kings. They're titans.
Stop it before I start crying, Scout.
Yeah, sorry. The other one,
as someone that's also from the north of England, and as the trail that they blazed, means so much to me, and will always will. So that sounds amazing. And then you said another one.
Oh yeah. So the other one is An Aim Not Devoid of Merit, which we just finished up, which is a look at every Steven Spielberg film and the way he uses the camera. Just purely camera mechanics with a little bit of politics, because I can't help myself. The most fun ones that we had there, and the most personal: Empire of the Sun, Munich, Lincoln, Warhorse.
Cool.
Those are my the ones that we really went to town on. But it was just so fun because some of them are super silly, where we're just like tired and beating our heads against the wall with movies like Hook, but then others were like completely enamored of them and in love with them, and have been. We're like, Tucker and I both have different. We had the exact same experience watching Warhorse, which is we saw them with people who didn't love them as much as we did, and it set us on this course to just prove how beautiful that movie is. And then, with The Fabelmans, we saw it together and we cried at different moments throughout the. Oh God,
I'm obsessed. The high school bully scene when he says, "Why did you photograph me like this?" I think is the defining scene of the 21st century.
I completely agree with you.
I think it is the most complex thing Spielberg has ever done. It's amazing.
Is so good. It's his De Palma movie. It's his Paul Mazursky movie.
Yeah.
It's his Bogdanovich movie. It's very, very, very rarely he lets himself be a 70s filmmaker. He doesn't always do this, but he did it in Munich and he did it in Fabelmans, and I think that's some of his best and most clear-headed filmmaking. And they're movies that I think that he's going to have the most complicated relationship to. Certainly with Munich, I don't think he knows what to do with himself now that he's made it, which I've always found so fascinating, and I just love the man.
Big
and I
fan
love his
of that
movies.
movie.
I love Munich so much. And then, sorry, but the last thing, I also have my own films that you can watch. If you search Scout Tafoya VOD pages, Vimeo, There's like, I don't know, 15 of them that you can watch on Vimeo on demand. They're only about $1 or $2 to rent. And then there's probably another 15 or 16 that are free that you can watch. So, you know, for the price of a sandwich, you can watch my entire 30 film body of work. So please avail yourself of that. And yeah.
Well, we'll have to have you back. You know, we got to find another.
We need to find another good one.
Deja vu.
Oh, there you go. It's Die Hard in Time.
It is. Well, it might be Die Hard in Time. Got to figure that out. Scout, thanks so much. This was really special.
This was awesome.
What a delight. Are you kidding me? This was so fun. Thank you so much, guys.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Well, that was the wonderful Scout Tafoya. What a great guest. What a great episode, I hope, and certainly a delight for us to do.
Don't pat yourself on the back,
It was a delight for us to do.
No, it was wonderful.
And so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. That's Con Air. We've got a bunch of great movies coming up, but can we stop with the Cybertruck thing? I think we need something else for our shtick.
I'll never give up on the side. No, that's fine. We don't have to do
I'm all for putting the screws to people that try and bust unions. But
okay, fine. We don't have to talk about the Cybertruck anymore. Just get in your Cybertruck and get out of here, Phil. That's fine. Look, we're on. You can watch this episode on YouTube. You can watch, our last 3, the Relic breakdown, and this episode on YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Email us diehardoab@gmail.com. Comment on Spotify. Do all the things. Next time on the show, Phil.
It's a movie that I have yet to see. That with Con Air, it was holding it back like the last Christmas present on Christmas morning. This is a movie I'm holding back from watching because of a sense of dread. Yeah. It's Speed 2, Cruise Control.
It's Die Hard on a ship?
It's Die Hard on a cruise ship.
Die Hard on a cruise ship? Okay, hopefully we don't get seasick.
But we have a fantastic guest, right? Like, I mean, there's no way this happens without this guy. The world's foremost expert on Speed
2.
It's Speed 2 and its lesser known prequel Speed. Chris Tapley is
coming back.
Probably
to be mean to us in a loving
50 miles per hour.
Probably to make fun of me for growing up in Massachusetts.
So that's going to be great. It will be interesting. Usually we try and be positive. We will see if there's anything whatsoever to be positive about with that movie. But regardless, we're going to have a fun time talking about it. I also thought before we go, it would be nice to talk about the event that occurred this weekend with some of our friends and colleagues.
This weekend, but a month ago when you hear this.
We experienced it this weekend, but it will be a little bit of a delay. But I thought it'd just be nice to give a shout out and talk about. We had the most amazing weekend celebrating the achievement of our friend Blake Howard and our friend Katie Walsh of the Miami Nice podcast, who were able to introduce Miami Vice at the American Cinematheque at the Egyptian Theater, and then introduce a surprise special guest of Michael Mann himself.
Pretty amazing.
And then we all went to Nate's Bar from Heat, the Blue Room, which is Liam and I's local here in LA. And the whole squad were there. It was a really, really special night. And it's like Blake had come all the way from Australia and brings with him just, joy and goodwill and
nice people.
It was just a wonderful, wonderful night. So that was a great moment for all of us. And of course, Blake has been on the show with The River Wild, and Katie's been on the show for Heat.
And they'll both be back.
In that, we hope we'll have them both back. So
it's very special. It's very special as you get older in life. Like sometimes it's hard to be like, who are my friends? Who do I know
isolated, right? Like
who
do
I
be physically present with people?
Yeah, and who do I talk to like about the things I love? And like I think so much of us grew up like quietly obsessed with this Chicago filmmaker who made these like ballbuster, incredibly romantic and beautiful movies, and the fact that we all kind of gathered to hang out and talk about it, and yet transcend that and make real lasting friendships is like really special. And as Justin from Cows in the Field said in response to a photo I posted, like, sometimes the internet is good, and that this is one of those very rare times. So shout out to the internet. No, shout out to Blake and Katie.
The great thing is about, like, what I love about the podcasting community is that it really actually is that. And not everything needs to be competition. It can actually, we can all help each other out. We can guest on each other's shows. We can share about it and form a genuine community, which for the most part is somewhat ephemeral and through the internet. But for that night, we actually got to be in the same place, and it was magic. So happy for Blake and Katie.
Love you guys.
There's one other thing I was just going to say, which is, and you've been absolutely instrumental in driving this forward, is that we now are on YouTube. And if you go on YouTube, you get to see Liam looking like he is pulling the two guns from Con Air right now because of the backdrop behind him.
I thought you were going to say that
entertained me throughout this entire episode.
I thought you were going to say you can see me producing the show, because every so often I go type something so I know what, whatever. I'm like live producing the show while we tape this. But look, it's fun, and like, it's another way to experience the show. And please subscribe to make my time spent on this justified.
Yeah. So you can get the video version as well now, which is something that we're having fun experimenting with. But yes, we will be back next time with Willem Dafoe on a boat.
Willem Dafoe with a
How bad can it be?
With
Willem
a different guy from the first movie who's also in the bomb squad. Sure, it checks out. It's still good. It's still good. It's just a little wet from being on a cruise ship. It's still good. It's still good. Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast created and hosted by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Rate, review, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, tell your movie podcast-loving friends about Die Hard on a Blank. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.